Dolphin Club with you here in San Francisco. We are ready to rock, as are the Golden State Warriors. 8 road wins in a row. They take down the Toronto Raptors last night, a 3-1 week. And we appreciate you being here on 95.7 The Game. What's up, Dan? You feeling frisky?
How are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. I mean, look, this is when it gets fun, right? This time of year is when it gets fun around the NBA. And the Golden State Warriors are about as fun of a basketball team to watch as any, Dan. I know that you might not have had a chance when you're in New York to get out to MSG. I was looking for you courtside there at the game. But right now, the Warriors are playing fantastic basketball. Just completed a 12-3 month of February. Have won 13 of their last 16. And they got a big one coming up on Sunday in Boston. Where do you want to start?
8 in a row. We can get after the boss. I'll let you. Come on. There's a reason why you're driving this ship. I just follow you, right? You lead me the way, and I'll come along for the journey. So, look at 8 in a row on the road. We always talk about turning the corner. There's an identity now. There's a starting lineup. There's a rotation. There is a hiccup.
Yep.
And I'm glad you mentioned New York City because, I do spend a lot of time there, including this past week. And so, yes, there is something that I do want to work into the show as it relates to one. Maybe I shouldn't start here. In light of all the euphoria and the good feeling that are the Golden State Warriors these days. But New York fans and Andrew Wiggins, I have something to say. But we can maybe leave that for a little bit later if you want to dive into it now. Again, man, you're driving this thing.
Well, that's the thing, Dan. It's like, while all of this kind of the umbrella of great basketball that they've been playing, within that umbrella is a couple things. Andrew Wiggins is out for personal reasons. We got Draymond Green going after our co-partner and Bonte Hill after the game, also in New York. Chris Paul did quietly return from his 21-game absence off of injury and has pretty much not skipped a beat. Steph Curry broke out of his shooting slump and threw that right in my face. And right now, someone like Moses Moody is emerging as another young, talented player for Golden State. Your boy TJD is playing some more minutes. I think he got 16 last night in Toronto. Pajemski was out due to knee soreness. Hopefully that's nothing serious. But, I mean, I think everyone is just wondering how dangerous Golden State can be. And I think that's kind of where I want to start big picture, how dangerous the Dubs can be. Because while they went 3-1, they got victories against the Wizards, the Knicks, and the Raptors as of last night. 3 games in 4 nights, nothing to scoff about, and they'll have another big one coming up on Sunday. Does it feel like, Dan, that last time we talked, we were looking at Denver, and we were talking about how important that game was? Has your mind changed? Do you feel like the Warriors are a more dangerous team, just as dangerous or less dangerous after another week of watching them win 3 of 4, 3 of which, by the way, on the road?
I think they get more dangerous as they go along, simply because there's always been the moving parts, and the more now that they play together, the more that they're healthy, the more that we see the emergence of Jonathan Kuminga, the more that we begin to witness the emergence of Moses Moody, Pajemski, all of these pieces that weren't in place at the beginning of the season, that now that they have, as Steph Curry said after last night's latest victory, they have a clear identity that the schedule works in their favor, that this is a team that's only going to get better, and it's the most dangerous they've been all year. But I say that with the understanding that, and I always go back to why I think the Western Conference is wide open and the Golden State Warriors have as much of an opportunity of getting to the Western Conference Finals as much as anybody else. But what we witnessed last week, I do think is a reminder, while there's the Golden State Warriors, and it's just up for grabs, not only in the West, but the East as well. The Denver Nuggets are the one team that I think is sort of the outlier. I think the Denver Nuggets are the best team in the NBA, and they proved that head-to-head with the Golden State Warriors last week. Now, that doesn't mean the Warriors can't beat them in a 7-game series. I'm just saying that there is the West, and there is the Denver Nuggets, who I think have established themselves as the team to beat, even though they don't have the best record, not the number 1 seed. But I think that anybody who watches and follows this stuff knows that it's basically going to go through them. They're the defending champs. They are intact, and when Jokic is on, he's the best player in the NBA, and that they have just about every base covered when you think about the Nuggets and shooting and defense and Gordon providing connecting everybody with the defense and Jamal Murray doing what it is that he does, that's the one team that the Golden State Warriors you would look at and say, okay, we may not be able to match up with them, and this is the team that might be clearly better than us. Everybody else, I think that the Warriors are right in that conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I thought they got humbled a bit on Sunday, and it's also the 7th straight time they've lost to Denver. They haven't beaten the Nuggets since the 2022 first-round series, which they knocked them out of the postseason. So this is a very different Denver team, the one we knew about 2 years ago. Jamal Murray's out for them now with an ankle injury. You know, I think that's something that we'll look at come postseason time, but it's a good litmus test. It's a good chance to see what you need to do to beat the best in the West. And they're going to have to try and beat the best in the East tomorrow in Boston. You talk about Denver. They've won 5 in a row. Well, the longest win streak in the NBA right now is the Celtics. They've won 10 straight, and they are very, very good at home. More on them in a bit, along with a litany of things. Looking at, of course, we'll get into Andrew Wiggins. We'll get into Draymond Green. We'll dig also into Stephen Curry, I think. But 888-957-9570 is the number. And the question we want to start with is, how dangerous do you think these Golden State Warriors are? Because I agree that if, for example, they faced Denver in the first round, I wouldn't feel good about it. But that's why their 12-3 stretch, their 13-3 stretch is important, because it's allowed them down to climb 5 games above 500. They are 32-27 after last night's win. They're in 9th place officially in the West by winning percentage over the Lakers. They got now 1.5 games back of Dallas, 2 games back of Sacramento, 3 games back of the 6th seed. And it does feel like, you know, a month ago we were talking about, all right, do it, just find your way through the play-in, try and get a home game. It does feel like with the basketball that they're playing, with 24 games left, 11 of which against sub-500 opponents, that the 6th seed is a possibility for them. And I would go as far as to say that unless you want to give yourself, because Denver's a game out of first, but that could be something where it comes down to the final game of the season, and you're looking at Minnesota, OKC, the Clippers, who are also 3 back of the 1 seed. That top 4 is impenetrable, but you don't want to be at the mercy of the play-in tournament determining how or where, I guess, you got to go. That you might be going to Denver. Like, you might be the 7th seed, the Warriors are, win that first game, and you got to go play Denver in the first round. To me, I think the 6th seed is within reach for Golden State. It's going to be very difficult because Dallas is also playing well. The Suns are playing well, who are tied with the Pelicans. But I think New Orleans is catchable. I think Sacramento's catchable. And certainly the Lakers are right now in the rearview mirror. The Warriors are and have been catchable. But Golden State has a favorable schedule. And I think in order to make them as dangerous as possible, securing a home series or securing a full 7-game series is the first thing they got to do. Like 3 games back is, with 24, is not insurmountable where we thought it was a month ago.
No, it's certainly not. I don't think the Warriors really need to worry about that sort of thing. And I know it's good fodder for us and certainly Dub Nation, but they've got to be really insulated. And that is just take care of who's ever in front of them. And that being the Boston Celtics next. You can't start looking at the standings and you can't keep an eye on the 6th seed. You just have to simply continue to play the sort of basketball that you've established over the last month. And everything will break out accordingly. I think that the Warriors, you know, they have a lot of teams to climb, and that's just it, that there's nobody necessarily, when you really get into it, there's nobody that's necessarily falling back to them. Now, Sacramento had, you know, a bit of a stretch there where they weren't playing very well, but for the most part, you know, everybody in front of them, including the Los Angeles Lakers now, are all playing good basketball. So if the idea is, well, we just got to wait for somebody to hit a losing streak, yeah, the Warriors can't scoreboard watch right now. They just have to continue to play what has been the most, you know, effective basketball, maybe the hottest team in the NBA over the last month. But when you look at the way it stacks up in the Western Conference and the teams that are immediately in front of them, you know, Sacramento, just when it looked like they were showing signs of, okay, here comes Sacramento, and they're beginning to reel and the wheels are coming off and Golden State can walk them down. They lost to Miami at home. They lost
without Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero.
Exactly, and they lost to Denver, which, you know, everybody's losing to Denver. Then they finished the week by, you strong victories over Minnesota last night. So, they go 2-2. So, it's the problem being is that you can get to that 6 seed. You can even listen, if you're going to get to the 6 seed, you can get to the 5th seed, because I don't think there's anything separating right now New Orleans and Phoenix. But the problem is that you just got to leapfrog a lot of teams that are also playing some of their best basketball right now. So you can go a little nuts when you're talking about, okay, what did Dallas do tonight? Where's Sacramento at? And of course, are the Lakers, are they winning or losing? The Golden State Warriors, and this is complete coach speak, the Warriors just simply have to eat what's on their plate and just continue to take care of Boston, square up against Giannis and Milwaukee when they come to town, and all of that self will take care of itself. I strongly believe, but you just have to right now, for the Golden State Warriors, is just continue to build on what has clearly been a turning point over the last, I'd say it coincides with the return of one Draymond Green.
No, you're right. And we'll certainly dig into him in just a moment. But you're right also in the sense that this is the most consistent level of play that we've seen, no matter who's been in. Whether it's been Moses Moody filling in as the start of the last 3 games for Andrew Wiggins, Podziemski moving into the starting lineup, which we've seen over the last month, Klay Thompson going to the bench, Chris Paul returning, Curry being up and down with his shot, but it returned the last 2 nights, Draymond Green being a bulwark back there, although he hasn't played max minutes. And that's another part of this too, which we'll also kind of dive into, this idea of how many good options Steve Kerr has. It's funny, at the middle point of the year, you look at November, they were 6-9. December, they were 5-7. January, they were 5-7. During those periods of time, we were wondering, are the rotations right? Was Kerr making the correct choices? And he's going to have some tough choices to deal with once he's got his full complement of characters. But now it's like he has so many good options. Like Moses Moody is looking like someone that needs to play and probably should have been playing. But you also got guys off the bench that got to play minutes. Gary Payton II, Trace Jackson Davis, in addition to also figuring out how many minutes to give to certain starters. I think Kuminga could probably get some more. I think guys can be playing less. It's interesting now that we've flipped from, okay, this is a 12-man rotation, and outside of Steph Curry, the hierarchy changes every night. Now to it does feel like there is more of a set, kind of consistent hierarchy with Golden State, even though Wiggins is now out. But it's now like he's got too much of a good thing. And that has resulted in 12 wins last month. And it looks like Golden State is playing the best basketball of their season. And so to me, it's been a lot of fun to watch each and every night. Like, for example, last night, to me, the question about the identity of the Warriors, what it is, and Curry talked about it, but he didn't really define it to me. Like, they're finding an identity, but to me, the identity of this team right now is experienced, undersized, tough, but a next man up type of team. That to me is their identity. They are the epitome of a next man up group. And we've seen that from Moses Moody. We've seen that from Brandon Podziemski. We've seen that now for quite some time from Jonathan Kuminga. And so I think the idea that these young guys are ready for their moment, to me, it doesn't necessarily put a ceiling on where this season can go. That's why I feel like they're so dangerous.
There's depth to this team like they've never had before. When you think about last night, for just about any other NBA team, if you're down 2 starters, that's problematic. For the Golden State Warriors, if it's not Steph and it's not Draymond Green that are out, I really think everybody's pretty much interchangeable, aside from maybe Jonathan Kuminga. But it's almost as though Steve Kerr is like, okay, I'm without 2 starters, and it's not Kuminga, and it's not Steph Curry, and it's not Draymond Green. That almost makes my life a little bit easier.
Yeah.
If now I only have to worry about playing 10 guys as opposed to playing 12, you shouldn't have a real issue with playing Moses Moody as opposed to Andrew Wiggins right now. I know it's a bit of a drop-off, but really, when you think about what it is that Moses Moody's been able to do over the last 2 games, and the same thing is, as good as Podziemski is, it's Klay Thompson going back to the 2 spot. Do you really have a significant drop-off? Yeah, I think, Podziemski's, as I certainly have made the case over the long haul, is a better player for the Golden State Warriors. But because there's so much depth to this basketball team now, that you're able to do that, and it's not necessarily a big deal at the end of the day. the Golden State Warriors now have just remarkable depth. It does create, and again, we can get into this in the next hour, but I do think that with Moses Moody now playing well, is it as easy that whenever it is that Andrew Wiggins does return, that he slides back into a starting spot? I mean, this guy has been so enigmatic over, the course of his career with the Golden State Warriors. And now the latest, once again, are the personal reasons that have him leaving the team. And now Moses Moody, who is younger, energetic, and the defense as well as the offense and all that he does in terms of the hustle plays, do we just simply say, okay, Andrew Wiggins is back, Moses Moody get back to the end of the line?
Well, that's the looming question. And 888-957-9570 if you want to answer, if you want to jump into the conversation. Phone lines are open from the 925. Warriors playing like the best team in the league on the road the last 2 months. I'm inclined to agree. I'd say probably the last month or so. But they've won 8 in a row on the road. That's nothing to scoff at. This is a team that, again, has made up a lot of ground. We were talking a month or two ago, Dan. 2 months ago, we were talking about a team that was 4 games or 5 games below 500. They're now 5 games above 500. And sure, that's gotten them to the 9th seed. They still have a lot of work to do, but they put themselves in the position to make up more ground by the strong stretch of basketball that they've played. 707 Comcast Business Text Line. Curry and Kuminga as good as any duo in the NBA. On certain nights, they can certainly give it to you. Like in New York, I thought Jonathan Kuminga looked like a man amongst children. And look, the Knicks were a bit shorthanded. They didn't have 2 of their 3 best players in Julius Randle and OG Anunoby.
Robinson also out.
Mitchell Robinson was also out. You're right. But that's a team that I was like, for example, let's just take that New York game. I was curious how Madison Square Garden, the bright lights, the big time, Broadway, if that was something that was going to affect not Curry, not Clay, not Chris Paul, not Draymond, but someone like Jonathan Kuminga, like Brandon Bajemski. And to their credit, they showed up. Jonathan Kuminga, in a big way specifically, showed up against a Knicks team that, even though they were undermanned, they test your physicality. They test your toughness. And I thought Kuminga rose to the challenge, and he was the best player on the floor in that game.
Well, Jonathan Kuminga had said before the game he was itching to play in New York.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys that, look at, man, this dude is from the Congo, man. He's not one of those guys that it's like, oh my goodness, this is something I've never experienced before. I mean, come on, man. His background, he's dealt with much more than having to play out there, on top of Penn Station in the most recognizable arena in all of the world. Jonathan Kuminga he wanted to play in New York, and he's been looking forward to this. And he's one of those guys that is not afraid of the moment. His self-confidence, although it had to be sort of tapered down a little bit, but I do believe when he said, earlier this year that there's nobody that can guard him in the NBA, those are the sort of guys you want on your team. I actually, what's interesting about these guys, Ev, is that, yeah, they're growing up in front of us in terms of their basketball, right? Because they're maturing. They're going from teenagers to their early 20s. And so how many times have we talked about how the game has slowed down for that of Jonathan Kuminga? But they're also growing up as people, right? We're also witnessing guys from teenagers growing into being young men. And watching his development, it's fascinating because I think he's going from this young, wide-eyed kid to somebody now that is playing with all sorts of confidence, now that wants every call, that is having a back and forth with the referees, and the referees are actually listening to him because he's establishing himself as a rising star in this league. He also, as his personality begins to define, he seems like he's got this sort of infectious smile that he plays with, and he fits right in with what I think is the Golden State Warrior culture. I just think that he is, I think he's the perfect fit for a guy that is somebody that is not only an effective basketball player and a rising star and has all the physical tools, but also somebody that I think is a good person, is somebody that plays with a sort of passion and joy that's all spearheaded by that of one Steph Curry, and everything sort of trickles down from there. And I think he's sort of a disciple of that in sort of his own way. So I know I went on a tangent there, but I think Kuminga has been looking forward to playing in New York. There was no doubt in my mind. In fact, if it was Game 7 of the NBA Finals and it's the fourth quarter and he has the ball in his hands, I don't have that fear that he's a young player. Oh, no, what is Kuminga going to do? I think Kuminga is one of those guys, as well as Podziemski, that would relish and actually want an opportunity to demonstrate that they can flourish at any level when it comes to playing basketball in the NBA.
No, I think you're spot on about Kuminga because remember, this was a guy that, whether it was a year ago or during his rookie season, there was a lot of people that, I don't know, would kind of nitpick the maturity aspect of, him off the court, whether it be pouting, whether it be not playing heady basketball. Those are things that I heard in reference to Kuminga, but it feels like, in regards to your comment about the culture, that there's been a bridge. Like there's been a combination. Like the Warriors have figured out, whether it's by process of elimination or not, like they need this guy and they need his skill set. Whether Kuminga always makes the right pass or always goes in to get the rebound, he's been doing more of that with more frequency. And I think he's made the plays and he has acquiesced to Golden State basketball in a way, but they're also meeting him halfway. Like they know that in order for this season to be special, in order for them to reach their potential, this kid's got to be a mainstay offensively every single night. Now I thought prior to the road trip, he might have hit a little bit of a rookie wall, or not a rookie wall. Sorry, I was talking about Podziemski, but like a wall within the season of, okay, he's finally cracked the starting lineup. He's helping the Warriors win. He's being a force in the stretch of games, and I think teams have adjusted to him or did adjust to him to a little bit. So now it's really just all about Kuminga adjusting to the adjustment, and that's where I love to see, from a basketball perspective, him against a team like the Knicks, against Washington, teams that are undersized and undermanned. He can impose his will in those kinds of games. Now, it remains to be seen if he can do that against, like, the Denvers, or tomorrow's a big test against Boston, although he had a really good game against Boston at Chase Center in December. So how can he continue to take those steps? That's why I think the Warriors are one of, if not the most compelling teams in the NBA, because of their young players, because you see a step taken by Kuminga every night, because you see Podziemski putting his fingerprints on games outside of last night, of course, when he was out. You see Moses Moody when he's given the opportunity to make hustle plays, to play defensively, to save balls, from saving possessions like he did in Washington. There's so many more things to watch about this team that don't include just the big three. And I feel like we know what we're going to get on most nights from Curry, from Draymond, even now from Klay Thompson off the bench. Chris Paul's been steady Eddie since he's come back. But we're watching, in addition to those guys keeping this team at a certain floor, we're watching the young guys bring the Warriors to another level. And that's what I'm excited about to watch every night, and why I can't wait to see what happens in Boston, because that's the best team in the NBA. They play their greatest basketball at the Garden, and it's a team that is really going to push, I think, where the Warriors are at right now, which is a team that has only lost to Denver, Los Angeles, being the Clippers, and then an overtime defeat in Atlanta over the last month. So right now, the Warriors have taken care of business against all the teams that they have been supposed to, and that to me is worth something.
It seems as though every time we've done this show over the last month, there's always this marquee matchup as we do the show on a Saturday.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago, it was Phoenix. Remember that? And then last week, it was Denver, and now it's the Boston Celtics. And I've maintained in all three of those games that the Golden State Warriors, while you can look at this and say, okay, look, if you lose to Boston, you still won 3 of 4 on what is a challenging East Coast road trip. So it's a feel-good regardless of what happens.
Yeah.
All that being said, beat Boston. Beat the Celtics. The hell with that. Beat Boston, if for nothing else, to prove to everybody in that locker room that, yes, you are indeed one of the best in the NBA. And also, while they've been able to compile wins, that hasn't necessarily been the case against winning teams. So this is another opportunity for the Golden State Warriors to match wits with the best in the NBA and demonstrate in front of a nationally televised audience that this is real deal stuff here. And I think that the Boston Celtics are a tough matchup, as was the Denver Nuggets, but I do think Denver is better than that of Boston, and that the Golden State Warriors have an opportunity, especially the way they've been playing of late, to beat Boston. And don't be satisfied, especially after the slow start, that you can afford to win 3 or 4 when you're playing like this, or that you can win 3 or 4 games and feel good. No, go ahead and sweep the road trip. Take care of the Boston Celtics. It's right in front of them. And I don't think that settling now, or this sort of frame of mind that we've won 3 or 4 on a road trip, should be sort of the thought process now for the Golden State Warriors and/or Dub Nation. Go ahead and once again beat Boston.
I got a thought on that in a moment. We can get to it after the break. I do want to get Gloria in San Francisco, has been hanging on patiently on. 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings, Dan Devone, Warriors this week. Gloria, how are you doing? What's going on?
Doing great, guys. Thank you. Wow, you guys hit on all the points that I was thinking about when thinking about the Warriors and their depth and bridging the youth and athleticism with the savvy veteran and leadership. I think it's coming along. I can see the culture coming along with the youth movement with the Warriors, and their depth is going to serve them well moving forward. I do think that their measuring stick is the Denver and the Boston Celtics. Denver is clearly head and shoulders above. I do still think, as you already stated, that the Warriors are gritty yet undersized. And so they have to play with that energy and that Warrior fun that they play with. You can see that they love playing together. And I'm so happy that they're showcasing Kuminga. Kuminga has earned his stripes. We have witnessed him grow in front of us. He is a bona fide star with us. And we so need that athleticism. I'm so happy. That's one thing about the Warriors. We have veteran skilled players, but we lack with athleticism, and Kuminga brings that. With that being said, I also think that when Wiggins come back, he shouldn't just be handed his job back, but he needs to play. Who plays the best out of he and Moses Moody? If Moses Moody has established himself even more, then I think Wiggins has to earn his job back. But my goal to see the Warriors is to at least get that 7th seed. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Gloria. Really good call. And I want to use that to get into something on the other side, which we've been kind of tossing around. This idea that, Andrew Wiggins is out. Don't want to speculate. We know that he's dealing with a serious family issue. We'll get to that report on the other side. But also, what does it mean for the Warriors? What does it mean for Moses Moody? What does it mean for the current 3-1 stretch this last week? A chance to go perfect on the road if they beat Boston. What does it mean for the future of this season? All of that we'll dig into on the other side as we continue on Warriors this week after the break. Dan Devone, Evan Giddings with you on 95.7 The Game. Back after this.
It's Saturday, and Palisades is going off. This is Johnny Mosley with Toyota's Tahoe Report. Load up your Toyota and dust off the powder boards because today...
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Yeah, we do things a bit unorthodox here at 95.7. It's one of the reasons it makes us, I think, a great station, one that people want to listen to. Of course, Golden State Warriors coverage every single Saturday morning, 9 to noon on Warriors This Week. But I was just watching Training Day, Dan. Great movie. Love it. And
King Kong ain't got S on me.
We were just going around like, is this The Office? Is that The Office? In the words of Denzel, you're in the office, baby. You're in the office. This is our office.
When they're in the car?
Yeah, when they're in the car, he's like, so we going downtown? Where are we going? He's like, no. You're in the office. This is where we do our work. And the Warriors right now are doing their work on the road. They got a game tomorrow against Boston, 3-1 over the last week. Only loss in their last 10 to Denver. And Dan, Gloria, right before the break, brought up, I think, the question that a lot of people are wondering about, and it has to do with this report from Shams Charania and Andrew Wiggins.
I'm told Andrew Wiggins is dealing and tending to a serious family matter right now, and the Warriors are giving him his space. They're giving him his time. The expectation, Steve Kerr's spoken on it, the expectation is Andrew Wiggins will be returning at some point this season. They're optimistic about that, but they also understand he's going through this process. So we certainly wish him and his family the best as he deals with it.
Yeah, so a serious family matter. Andrew Wiggins out for personal reasons, has now missed 3 games. It kind of sounds like he's going to miss more than 3. He'll probably be out against Boston, and no one really knows when he's going to come back. And it's not our job to speculate, but it is our job to think about what the ramifications or the effects of that are. And the immediate effect is Moses Moody being thrust into the starting lineup. Played 31 minutes last night. His workload has kind of ticked up. He's playing 27 minutes per game over the last 3. He's helped the Warriors win all 3 games. And now what do we do? I mean, what do we do when and if Andrew Wiggins comes back? I'm kind of inclined to believe, Dan, that this is not going to be a 25-game absence like it was last season. But then again, we also didn't think it was going to be 25 games last year, in which he came back at the beginning of the playoffs, sat game 1 against Sac, and then started for the remainder of the postseason.
Well, he's been so enigmatic with this basketball team. Sorry. Hold on with me here. I got some technical issues.
Oh, not another one.
No, we're good. Listen, we don't know, so you have to give him the benefit of the doubt. But what we do know is that he is a guy, when he's playing, that he has a tendency to sort of crawl into a hole. And there's this sort of, like the Warriors, and they always talk about this, how Steph and Draymond are like, they want him to be that high energy guy. So he's a guy that, does it a little differently, and he's always been that way. I think since he came into the NBA, he sort of lives in his own world from time to time. Now, again, with none of us knowing what it is that he's dealing with, I just want to say this. Again, at the top of the show, when I mentioned New York City, and it's not only relegated to New York or Philadelphia, I think that Andrew Wiggins should be thankful that he's playing in the Bay Area, and this is certainly not an indictment on sports fans out here, but I can just tell you that if this is the Apple and New York City, that people are going after him, all right? And I think the fact that Steve Kerr is able to just simply put everyone at ease, and the fact that we don't have this thing lit up like a Christmas tree in terms of phone calls and people on the message board saying the hell with this guy, doing this after the trade deadline. Again, I'm not going after Andrew Wiggins. I'm just telling you that if this is New York City, if this is Philadelphia, and I'm not saying those are better. Look, those people they're nuts out there, right? But there's a different way that all of this is being approached. There's a different climate in the room when you're talking about Andrew Wiggins after the trade deadline deciding to leave his basketball team. Again, without knowing what it is that he's dealing with. I just know that the ramifications in terms of that relationship with the fans and their interpretation of it is very different the way it's handled out here in the Bay Area as opposed to certain places in the East Coast.
Well, that's interesting because right now they're on the East Coast. Like, I figured if there was going to be questions about Wiggins, and, the normal beat writers for the Warriors each and every night will ask the obligatory question of, where's Wiggins? But you'd figure with the Warriors being in the Apple, your Apple, them going to Toronto, where Wiggins hails from, that there might be some more limelight on where he is or what he's doing. And there really hasn't been. Now, maybe that's because it's a back-to-back and they didn't spend much time. Like, I actually heard this. I was listening to, I forget what his podcast it was, but it's an NBA podcast about how Madison Square Garden basically shuts down 90 minutes after the Knicks players are done talking. Like, they get the media in and out. They don't want them in the, like, so it's not like players or media members can kind of linger around the Garden looking for answers. And maybe that helps the Warriors, along with having to get out of there quickly. Toronto, I'm sure they're flying into Boston. But there are three major hubs, I think, that would, if there was anything to expose, do some digging, because you have the East Coast media, the biggest market in the country in New York. You have Wiggins' hometown in Toronto, and then you have Boston, in which those media members will certainly get in your grill and ask you the tough questions. Not to say that people out here on the West Coast don't do that, but I think they're just a little more respectful and understanding of the position that the franchise is in right now. And the message from it is basically, he's got a serious family matter. We support him 100%. And I'd like to think that the station has echoed that sentiment here. But if we're going to, if it was to get exposed a little bit, I think it would be on this road trip in which you're hitting all three of those markets.
Well, I don't know that I'm necessarily speaking about the media. Certainly the media is respective of what it is that Steve Kerr has to say and what it is that's going on with Andrew Wiggins. I'm talking about the phone lines. Bob from Bensonhurst, go ahead, and everybody out in Brooklyn and down in Chelsea are going. They have something to say. Like, this isn't sitting well with the fan base. It isn't necessarily the media or anybody sitting out there that's doing a story for the New York Post, but rather the fans, whether it's Philadelphia or whether it's Boston or it's New York. I think that the temperature amongst those people is very, very different from what it is that we're experiencing currently here in San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably not a whole lot of people that are, camping out on his lawn or know where he lives and trying to peek through the window. I mean, that might be more of an East Coast thing, certainly, than a West Coast thing. But the fact remains that Wiggins has missed some games, and he's probably going to continue to miss games. And in the meantime, and I'm with Dublin March here on the YouTube chat powered by First NorCal Credit Union, I'm a proponent of be where your feet are. The Warriors need to beat the teams in front of them. Nothing else matters. I kind of like that, too, because it doesn't matter that Wiggins is gone. You'd love to have him here because, number one, they're playing great basketball with him. Number two, I think if the Warriors are to reach their potential, he's got to be a part of it. But we don't know when he's going to come back. So all the Warriors can do is try to continue to stack wins. And it's interesting because throughout this season, like, for example, the Warriors have dealt with an indefinite absence before this season. Draymond Green. That was for very different reasons, but he was suspended for, I think, close to 20 games. They didn't necessarily know when he was going to come back, when they were going to get him back. In that time, Jonathan Kuminga emerged and has stepped into the forefront of what he's becoming now, which is, I believe, a future star. Someone like, like Chris Paul was able to play more minutes. Curry had to do more. Klay Thompson had to do more. Pajemski was the other big one, of course, who got a lot of minutes in Draymond's absence and also GP2 being hurt. So the absence in the past for the Warriors, while they haven't maybe won as many games, and they are winning games now, it's allowed other players to step up. And that's why I've been excited, because it's allowed a player that I think has been kind of biding his time patiently and has earned now the opportunities he's being given, is Moses Moody. And he's been given a shot.
There's a lot to unpack there. First of all, when Andrew Wiggins comes back, is he handed his starting position? The other of which is, you know what, Dub Nation, and all of you that, and I'm sure we'll hear from you, the regulars here on Warriors This Week, guess what? You're right. I think at the end of the day, what's being proven is that all of you that said, and you would just nail us every Saturday, Moses Moody needs to play. Where the hell's Moses Moody? He's getting disrespected. Well, we said it's a numbers game, and he's just unfortunately part of just sort of a crunch here where there's no place to play the guy. You know what? I think we're being proven wrong. And more specifically, not me, because I don't make these decisions at the end of the day. It's Steve Kerr. And again, I never want to bottom feed on a show like this going after a coach, especially when the team's winning. But when you look at this in retrospect, you know what? Why the hell weren't you playing Moses Moody? And when you just pointed out how the emergence of Jonathan Kuminga had a lot to do, obviously, it went hand in hand with the departure and the suspension of Draymond Green. Mm-hmm. Like, Steve Kerr has not come willingly, and I've said this all along, that a lot of what it is that we've seen, including Podziemski, the only reason Podziemski got run, I'll never forget it, was that Minnesota game where, you get Draymond Green kicked out of the game. Not only that, Klay Thompson's kicked out of the game. Oh, Podziemski, we need you. Go ahead and play. He tears it up, and suddenly, he's getting time. All of this has been situational. It hasn't been. Steve Kerr talked about this last night after the game. Somebody just asked him randomly. It's like, when you think about this season, you guys are probably in the best place you've ever been. I'm paraphrasing one of the questions. Mm-hmm. And he talked about the beginning of the year, and he said, and he was very forthright, and he seemed a little bit uncomfortable. He said, look, at the beginning of the year, we thought we would do it the same way we did 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's essentially with the core and the addition of Chris Paul. He never factored in a Podziemski. He never thought Kuminga, I think, would get to this point. He had no idea Trace Jackson would be doing what it is that he's doing.
Yeah.
He had no idea that Moses Moody could potentially now be a starter replacing Andrew Wiggins. And yes, I think that's a serious conversation that everybody has to have. So when you think about the Golden State Warriors, as you laid out in the beginning of the show, the identity of this team, the core is the core, but they're getting older. The identity of this basketball team is the youth movement. The young basketball players on the team will dictate just how far this team will go this year. Yes, Steph will be Steph when you're getting out of Draymond, but they're all now in their mid-30s. So it's them, and now it is all about these younger basketball players in their early 20s. They now become the driving force on this basketball team going forward. You want to know just sort of how deep of a run they're going to make? Are they going to get to the Western Conference? Well, look no further than Moses Moody's development, Podziemski, Jonathan Kuminga's growth, the more minutes you get for Trace Jackson Davis, all of these young players. This is where the Golden State Warriors are at. That, my friends, is the X factor when you're talking about Golden State and a potential run at another title.
Well said, Dan. Well said. And this is from the 650, I think also well said.
Sometimes I think I'm, in this political year that I'm running for office, right?
Give it time.
I'm stumping here.
Give it time. City of San Francisco needs a, what are you, like a second generation,
are you kidding
third generation?
Can you imagine if they were to go into my closet? Like all the bones I got laid back there?
You got skeletons, man.
Yes, man. I'm the last dude to throw my hat into that arena.
You can catch Dan, by the way, on the podium outside the Dolphin Club later on this evening. He's going to be out in the streets of San Francisco giving his political opinions on not just, the Warriors where they're at, but, of course, the city of San Francisco and what they need. They need young people. They need a movement of young,
like you,
promising, growing members of the community.
It's like you. It's time for guys like me to step aside because guys, in all seriousness, man, it's about at some point, you got to recognize the next generation. Now, listen, it doesn't work if it's all Podziemski and it's all Kuminga. You need the guile and the experience and obviously the physical tools that Steph brings you, but you need to embrace the youth, man. Same with you and same with Granny and all the young talent at the station. Like, don't just continue to ignore it. Evan Giddings continually knocking on Matt Hagian's door, man. Give me a shot. I'm good. It's time to open that door and embrace the young man.
And shout out to Ken Luttrell also here on the weekends, running the board and making us sound as good as we can. This is from the 650, okay? Wiggins being gone is an amazing solution to the Moody problem, and gives Moody an opportunity to really raise his game and the Warriors another opportunity to train another Warrior. Well, I like what you did there with that. But I think that's true. And oftentimes look, what was it, Lou Gehrig? Wally Pipp?
That's why you're beautiful.
You never know when your moment is
starting lineup, man.
You never know when that moment is going to be yours. And this is where I do think the season is different. Like, to kind of backtrack a bit, like I was with Kerr in the sense that at the beginning of the season, they tried to do it the same way they did 2 years ago. And to be fair, they started 5-1. They started 6-2. So there was evidence that playing the older guys could get you off on the right foot. But then what happened? You lost, I think it was like a close game to Denver, and then you got battered by Minnesota, by OKC, by Cleveland. You lost like 6 in a row, and all of a sudden you're below 500. You're thinking, well, what the hell happened? Our old guys were good enough to beat some of the teams in front of them that were lesser than, but were they good enough? Are they still good enough to help get us to the next level, to be in true contention, where a lot of us, I think, are projecting them to be perhaps unfairly or prematurely, but now. And why we're projecting that now is because Steve Kerr has been forced to play these guys. He's been forced to switch things up, whether it's because of injury, whether it's because of suspensions, whether it's because of lack of production. He's been forced to elevate young players into the starting lineup or into primary minutes and rotations. And it's interesting to me too, Dan, like you think about the older guys on the team not named Curry and Dre. Klay Thompson's pretty volatile. Chris Paul is steady, but I think they have him in the right role because he's 38 years old. He's not a guy that's going to play 35 minutes a night. The steadiest players in the starting lineup are kind of the floor raisers that I see and have seen the last 3 games would be Podziemski along with Moody. Kuminga is and has been solid, but it's interesting that you look at 3 players that are about 21 years old, and in a way, they've kind of been the steadiest part of this last week since Andrew Wiggins has been out, whether for personal reasons.
Yeah, again, it's so evident to me just watching games when you see young players. And it's something that is just, you can't, again, it's not on the stat sheet. It's just watch the game. Watch the movement. I always say this, pop in YouTube and just check out Steph Curry.
Pop in like a VHS tape? What are you talking about?
Check out, go to your phone, get on your tablet, people with no life, and just stare at a screen for 8 hours a day. No, but look at YouTube. By the way, when you want to go Wally Pipp and talking about, the Lou Gehrig Wally Pipp reference was, Wally Pipp was the starting first baseman for the New York Yankees, went out with an injury, and then, never got his job back.
That's before the Great War.
Lou Gehrig stayed in that position for, the next 15 years. So as it relates to one Evan Giddings, what's the show that you do here? You're producing for
Steiny and Guru.
Yeah. So the Wally Pipp, just to put it in 95.7 the game terms, my man Steiny as well as Guru, the next time you want to go out sick, just think twice because, Evan will be hitting into that seat and he'll be warming that thing up and who knows where they'll come out of the damn thing. All right.
Well, just
moving on here. Talking to, in the beginning of the year when you're talking about the Golden State Warriors and they got off to the good start and it was the older core and it was Steve Kerr saying, I want to do it the way we did it 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But didn't you get the sense, and I know we're revisiting history, that it was sort of a bit of a bubble, like a sort of a house of cards. I didn't really feel it was very foundational at the time. We always talk about an identity. I could see that thing bursting at some point, and sure enough, that's what would happen a couple of weeks later. But I digress. We think about the Golden State Warriors. What the hell was I talking about? The youth movement on this team?
Yes, sir.
I'm talking about, the Moses Moody's of the world and some of these younger players. That's really where we're at with this team. And I think that, I think that they need to get some more run, quite frankly. I'd like to see more of Trace Jackson Davis. I know it's the same thing every Saturday, and it's happening. Hey, did you see what happened last night?
Slowly but surely, Dan.
Did you see what happened last night?
16 minutes for TJD.
But did you see who was not in the rotation?
Yes, I did.
And this was your call going back months.
It's been a while.
Dario Saric, sayonara.
He's a great guy, but oh boy. Yeah, he's troublesome. It's interesting, like some of the biggest runs by opposing teams, like you look, I think even the Knicks game, because it was like a 5-point game with 6 to play or something before Kuminga and Moody really, I thought, grabbed control of the tail end of that game. But when Saric comes in, typically teams tend to go on runs. And I have another thought behind that I want to get to in a moment, but I do want to open up the phone lines to Mark and Millbrae. 888-957-9570 is the number. Warriors this week. That's Dan Devone. My name is Evan Giddings. Appreciate all of you joining us here every single Saturday as we do from 9 to noon. Mark's out of Millbrae. My man, how are you? What's up, Mark?
What's up, guys? Yeah, this is so fun to watch. The Warriors just playing lights out basketball on the road right now. It's been one of the best road teams, as of late. And if you would have told me the one thing that I would have never believed you, the Warriors would be better on the road than they are at home. Since the dynasty run started in 2015, they've been either the best or second best team at home in the league. This is a jarring differential and big time for them, because if it wasn't for the road right now, they'd probably be out of the play-in. I mean, the way they're playing on the road is really what's keeping them in this race, and the way they're just taking teams out, as you guys mentioned. mentality in all sports is next man up. So if you're Moody now, just like Kuminga, who was pissed off he wasn't getting minutes earlier in the season before Kerr was forced to play him, and now he's a stud, this is your chance now with Wiggins. If and when he comes back, you prove that you're reliable and you deserve to be on that floor. And we know when the playoffs come around and the rotations tighten up, you want to be one of those guys because, as you guys mentioned, Storage, I think, is practically out of the rotation. I think Kerr realizes now that TJG is the guy there, so I think he's going to be out of the rotation. Obviously, the young guys like Robert Quinones are not going to play much, and it's going to be CP3 playing, and even Looney minutes are going to be limited. So I think Kerr is going to go with the youth movement, and deservedly so. Those guys have shown they can play. And the way they're playing right now, guys, this is the mentality they need because look at the West, man. This 1 through 10, this is as good as the West has ever been. And one of these teams out of Sacramento, Dallas, and the Warriors and the Lakers are going to be out of the playoffs. And so you just want to hope you're not that team when you have close to 50 wins and you're not in the playoffs. Back in, I think it was like in 2008 when the Warriors won close to 50 games and they didn't even make the playoffs. So I just love the way they're playing. If they play like this, guys, even Boston, they've shown they can beat Boston at home. I know it's a different animal in the Garden, but Boston tends to sometimes play down. So I think the Warriors, ideally we thought a 2-2 road trip. Now you want to get greedy. I think they can go into Boston and win. Obviously they're going to be the underdog, but Boston, the thing that I think that the reason why they don't win a title yet with the talent they have is they want to play into the Warriors game plan where they think Tatum and Brown want to play jump shot doing, and the Warriors are the best team of all time in doing that. So I'm not going to be surprised if the Warriors win tomorrow night. But all in all, just keep playing like they are right now, guys. And you want to avoid, outside of Denver, to me, nobody in the West scares me, fellas. And maybe the Clippers, but we know the Clippers in the playoffs tend to struggle. So outside of Denver, I'm going to put them. Everybody else is fair game, in my opinion. I'll take your thoughts on that. Thanks for the time.
Thanks for the call, Mark. Yeah, I think he brings up something interesting about the road because one thing that last year the Warriors could not do was win on the road. Like they won 11 games. They were good at Chase Center enough to get them to the 6th seed. But right now they're 16-12 after the win yesterday on the road. That is a better record in terms of winning percentage than a few teams in front of them, including Dallas, Sacramento, and Phoenix, who's a 5 seed. So really the Warriors are playing road basketball at a level of a team that should have a 7-round series secured, but it's really been at home that they haven't been able to grab as many of those wins. So, I'm not sure that Boston is a team that I want to see right now. They are playing as good as anyone in the NBA. They're playing the best of any team, honestly, in the NBA. But the Warriors have a seat at the table, and that's why I can't wait for tomorrow, 12:30 tip.
There are no holes in Boston. When you think about, obviously, we're well aware of Jason Tatum, who I think I think there's an asterisk next to this game for Tatum. Tatum is tired of hearing how he plays not well against the Golden State Warriors, or the Warriors have his number. He's a bona fide star in this league. If there's one little bit of a wart, is that their decision-making late in games sometimes is questionable, but I think that they, you got to tip your hat. They felt as though they were right there with the Golden State Warriors, and when they needed to put them over the top, they went out and they took care of. Like, they weren't complacent. They went and got Drew Holiday. I mean, I'm a huge Drew Holiday fan. Yeah. Like, that guy is just, that's how you win with two-way players like Drew Holiday. And you talk about, Kuminga and his attitude and how he fits in with the way the Golden State Warriors do it from a cultural standpoint. He's one of the best dudes in the NBA in terms of people. So that's a fit. And then, are you kidding me? Porzingis? That just puts you over the top because Porzingis now comes in. Think about it. He was a number 1 option when he came into the league with New York, a number 2 when he goes to Dallas. Now he's like number 4 out there in Boston. And he's found what is a really, really good role for him out there. And that to go along with Horford and all the role players, and Derek White now is a legitimate guy. And then you got Pritchard coming off the bench. Much like that at Dallas, there's no holes. Like, they're solid right across the board. But it's another measuring stick for the Golden State Warriors. Like, we can't sit here and say, or at least I can't sit here and say, that this is a team that's ready to contend for an NBA title. If that's the case, then go out and beat Boston at Boston. I know when we look at it, it's the cards are stacked against you, but the Golden State Warriors have played so well. And the one thing that the Golden State Warriors have, and this now becomes, to reiterate what it is that we're talking about, This now becomes a bullet in the chamber going forward when you're talking about the identity that now is the Golden State Warriors. And the one thing that they have in their favor now that very few teams have, aside from that of Minnesota and OKC, but I would say because the Warriors have the experience, I give them the edge there. But when you're talking about Boston, when you're talking about Phoenix, when you're talking about matching up against, Dallas as well as Sacramento, the Warriors have a youth movement that these other teams do not. And that, to me, can be the deciding factor.
I agree. I think it's also because, quickly before we get to the break here, Stephen Curry's about to have his 5th child. Now, I said
Fourth.
I said that wrong on purpose.
Oh, all right.
Riley, Ryan, Cannon, the child-to-be, and the Boston Celtics.
Oh, he's good.
That is his 5th child as of 2022. So I'm interested to see how Steph goes into the Garden, how the Boston Celtics play against them. I think the Warriors have a psychological advantage. We'll get into that more on the other side.
Stay healthy, Guru and Steiny. Kid is good.
I also do want to dig back into that youth movement because I have some thoughts about Moses Moody as it pertains to Wiggins, his absence, wishing Wiggins all the best. But in the meantime, we got to move forward. We got to talk about this basketball team as currently constructed. And we'll do that on the other side. 1 hour down, 2 to go here on Warriors This Week. That's Dan Devone. My name is Evan Giddings. Back after this on 95.7 The Game.
I'm still going for it, even with higher stroke risk from atrial fibrillation and a regular heartbeat not caused by a heart valve problem. Over a 3-year study, Eliquis apixaban tablets reduced stroke risk better than warfarin, and over 97% of Eliquis patients did not experience a stroke. A first stroke occurred in 2.9% of warfarin patients versus 2.3% of Eliquis patients.
Don't stop taking prescription Eliquis without asking your doctor. It may increase your stroke risk. Eliquis can cause serious and in rare cases fatal bleeding. Don't take Eliquis if you have an artificial heart valve, abnormal bleeding, or antiphospholipid syndrome. While taking, you may bruise more easily or take longer for bleeding to stop. A spinal injection while on Eliquis increases risk of blood clot.
Warriors This Week continues on 95.7 The Game.
What is this, Ken? What is this? This one of your New York beats?
That's Trick Daddy right there, Miami's finest.
Ah.
I'm a thug.
I'm a thug. I ain't. I ain't. That's for sure. That's Dan Devone. Evan Giddings with you here. 1 hour in, 2 hours to go on Warriors This Week. We are taking your calls at 888-957-9570. The Warriors right now, 5 games above 500, 24 games to go. They come off a 3-1 week, only lost to Denver. Then they go on the road. They take down Washington. They take down New York. They beat Toronto last night on a back-to-back, and then they get the Boston Celtics tomorrow afternoon at the Garden, the number one team in the NBA, having won their last 10. The Warriors have won 8 in a row on the road, and the last 3, I think, have been because of what you talked about, Dan, which is their depth and their younger players continuing to emerge. And I just wonder, with Andrew Wiggins being out due to personal reasons, and it looks like he's going to miss tomorrow, I expect him to miss, I don't know, a total of maybe, in between 5 and 10 games. At that point, if the Warriors continue to play good basketball, like for example, if they win tomorrow in Boston, which we all certainly hope they do, then it does pose the question of, well, should Moody continue to start? And should Wiggins, who throughout this season has come off the bench due to a lack of production, but the Warriors began this run about a month and a half ago with Wiggins in the lineup, with Kuminga, with Draymond primarily coming back, gluing them together. Do you believe that if the Warriors play and continue this play at this level of basketball, that Moody is someone that should continue to be in the starting 5?
Well, either way, he needs to play.
Yeah.
So either he continues to start if things are going well for the Golden State Warriors, but he certainly has proven, if he stays on this trajectory, that he's got to get in that rotation. You got to get this guy minutes. I still see him as a really, really good bench player. When I see him play as effective as he is as a starter, I think on a good team, he's 6 or 7 or 8 in the rotation. But would I be surprised if Steve Kerr said, we're sitting Wiggins and going with Moody? No, not at all. And I think a lot of people in Dub Nation would be down with that. But either way, this idea of him disappearing for a couple of weeks and getting DMP'd and not playing at all, I think Moody has now made the case that has to end. Let's stop that nonsense, okay? We've seen what it is that he can do. And everything that people have been clamoring for, that Moses Moody can provide, and he's a guy that's a baller, he's a good guy, keeps his nose clean, and not only that, this dude has effort on just about every play. And I'm all about that youthful energy, and it's another guy in his early 20s that, if nothing else, if he's a starter, certainly could see that, but if he's not, I think at the end of the day, what we've recognized is that Moody now has made the clear statement for himself and to everybody else that he deserves to get run.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think that in regards to the question about identity, Curry seems to feel like it's close to solved. The identity of this team, to me, is experience, it's toughness, it's being undersized, and most importantly, it's a next man up mentality that everyone on that team has now embodied, and none more so recently than Moses Moody. You look at the 3 games, he's a plus 36, 12.5 points in 27 minutes. He's also getting multiple steals. He's also blocking shots. He's now shooting in a small sample size, 44% from three-point range. That's a guy that has carved out a role for himself, whether it's as a starter, as a bench player. He has taken full opportunity of his moment, and I'm very interested to see what he does against Boston, because this is a guy that, to your point, gives you heart. He gives you hustle, and I think he raises the floor of this team. I'm not sure he raises and pushes the ceiling, but you know exactly what you're going to get on a given night from Moses Moody, and that to me is valuable, whether it's 15 minutes, whether it's 20 minutes, whether it's been playing at 27 like he has the last 3 games. This is a guy that the Warriors, I think, need, and that's what I've learned over the last 3 games and have learned over the course of this season watching Moody. When Wiggins is out, they need Moody. Even when Wiggins comes back, whenever he does, I think they still need Moses Moody. Will he be the difference between them winning a championship and not? Probably not. But it is unquestionably a position to where the Warriors are better when he plays. And I think that minutes need to be found from other pieces and other places in this roster to prioritize this guy, because he's earned it.
And this is what I think you do specifically. Dario Saric, out of the rotation. Kevon Looney, out of the rotation. Podziemski, I was a big fan of Podziemski and starting and replacing Klay Thompson before it ever happened, but I don't think that he needs to get as much run as we say. I think he can. In other words, I think Moses Moody can take some of the minutes from that of Podziemski, and he can also take the minutes from Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson's been good coming off the bench, but he's gets so much time. Like the love affair that Steve Kerr has with Klay Thompson, it's almost as if I feel bad taking you out of the starting lineup, but I tell you what, I'm going to make sure that you play. Mm-hmm. He got, 30 minutes? He gets like 30 minutes a game now. And, yeah, he can be good, but he doesn't need to get that much run. Not at the expense when I'd like to see a little Trace Jackson. I'd like to see, Moses Moody a little bit more. So if he doesn't start, I think the first thing you do is, okay, Kevon Looney and Podziemski, you guys are out of the rotations because I can't juggle. I can't continue to do this with 12 guys. So I'm going to make it a little easier on myself and play 10. Even at 10, it's challenging. Okay, how do I get Moody some more run? Well, I'm going to reduce some of the minutes that I've been giving to Klay Thompson as well as Podziemski, as well as removing the other two guys from the rotation. That, to me, is a start.
Interesting. I'm curious what fans feel about that. 888-957-9570 is the number. 925 Comcast Business text line. Would take Moody over Podziemski in a heartbeat. All Pods can do on defense is take a charge, and other players will soon tire of this tactic. I'm not so sure about that. I think Podziemski is valuable, but it's interesting. As we move closer to the playoffs, we will begin to think about, okay, what does the rotation look like? Who needs to be in the rotation? And that's where I do think that Kerr, whenever Wiggins comes back, will ramp him up to the point where he can get back into the starting lineup, because at the end of the day, the playoffs are about dudes. They're about guys. And Wiggins is, due to his experience, further along than someone like Moses Moody. So if Wiggins misses, say, 10 games, I think at first Moody's still starting as they get Wiggins healthy, as they get him back into shape. But to me, the postseason is you still need Wiggins to unlock the best version of this team. And that, to me, is what's frustrating about the personal leave of absence, is I'm curious how it's going to mesh when he comes back. Is it just going to be a flawless, seamless fit when he returns? How does that impact Moody? Does that matter? And I just wonder how fans are feeling about the team right now without Wiggins. So again, 888-957-9570. Let's get out to Austin from San Jose. Always a voice of reason here on 95.7 The Game. Austin, my man, how are you?
Hey, fellas, what's going on? Listen, just a couple comments. One is just on Moody. I've been back and forth on this guy. I like him, but I'm not. I want to say more. I want to see more. Small sample size. I think the real issue with Moody, I think the reason why he wasn't playing, it's not because Kerr's an idiot. It's because if you really think about Moody, you got to figure out what he does well every night. Jack of all trades is really not a good place to be in the NBA. So if you're going to stay in the NBA, you have to say, what is he going to be? Is he going to be a defender? Is he going to be a shooter? Is he going to be a two-way guy? I don't see him as a Wiggins. I don't see him as a Klay Thompson. So at least in terms of career, he's somewhere in the middle is where he is, but I think that's where Moody struggles. So let's see him over 10 games. Let's see what he turns out to be before we start saying, hey, he's got to play. Yeah, he's got to play now, but you got to see whether he can be that consistent guy over time. The other question I had was kind of throwing something on the table, guys. You got one guy you can bring back next year, either CP3 or Klay Thompson. Who are you bringing back on a 2-year? Klay Thompson or CP3? And you can only break one. So let me know what you think. Thanks.
Austin, that's a great question. I mean, I have my answer, Dan. I think it's pretty clear.
Go ahead.
It's Klay Thompson. I love Chris Paul. I think he's been very good for this team. But, for example, to just use Moses Moody, I think one reason that I've been hesitant about Moses, and we talk about like the numbers game, or have talked about the numbers game, is, to me, I just don't think I don't think he shoots it well enough from 3-point range. And he has over these 3 games, but over the course of his career, he's about league average or less, and has been less than league average for the majority of the season. That, to me, is an issue if you're not a plus-plus defender, if you're not supremely athletic, and to Austin's point, is kind of a master of none. Moody has shot it really well on this road trip so far, and that, to me, has been unlocking a lot for the Warriors. But where else outside of Curry do you have consistent 3-point shooting? That, to me, is something that only Klay Thompson right now can bring. And unless you're going to replace that this offseason, I would prioritize him over Chris Paul.
It's a great question. Really a good question. Because to me, there's not an easy answer. And while I agree with what it is that you say, because he is the one guy, and it's the reason why, probably to answer my own question, why Steve Kerr plays him so much, because he's in that second unit now, which means typically Steph is sitting a lot of the times. And so when Steph is sitting, who's the other guy that's going to give you perimeter shooting? It's Klay Thompson. But at the same time, Klay Thompson's lack of consistency is something you really have to take into consideration. And Klay Thompson, more than the other two older players on this team, namely Steph Curry and Draymond Green, shows his age to me more than anybody else. Last night he was good, but he just, what you have to understand is that defensively, he is not the same guy. And all that energy that I talked about that the young players provide, that is not Klay Thompson any longer. Klay Thompson at times is just somebody that's just there and is taking up space. And at times it's so clear that his better years are so far in the rearview mirror, but then, he'll get into a zone and provides that perimeter shooting that is so valued, not only with the Golden State Warriors throughout the league, but you offset that when you think about what it is that Chris Paul's been able to do with this basketball teams, that calming force, almost like a player's coach, doesn't turn the ball over, has everybody in the right spot. I mean, we talk about Draymond Green's impact when he came back to this team. To me, it's been very noticeable with Chris Paul back. Chris Paul is a calming influence, and he is, he makes this team better. He is somebody that just with a ball in his hands, you feel secure. At times, the Warriors just play with their hair on fire, and that can be really volatile, really good. And at other times, it's like, oh my God, somebody please put this out. And he's sort of that steadying factor that just doesn't let you get, out of control, and you just feel as though dad's home. There's a parent in the room. And so I don't know. I mean, it's not as easy an answer to a question that for you, as for me, as it was for you, because I see Chris Paul as being somebody that really is a major contributor to this basketball team. And Klay Thompson is sort of a hit or miss, but I recognize the outside shooting and what it is that he does in terms of spacing, in terms of drawing crowds and double teams and opening opportunities, especially in the pick and roll, as we've seen with Trace Jackson-Davis. I mean, there's not a lot of guys that have that gravitational pull like that of Klay Thompson, which I fully recognize. But then the drop-off is something that you really the warts on him is something that you really have to consider at age 34 now. The other answer, I just really quick to address what it is that Austin had to say when he's talking about, jack of all trades, those sort of players, and I forgot how he phrased it, are not necessarily somebody that, they don't have the same level of importance. And I would push back a little bit when you think about, I mentioned Drew Holiday, sort of a jack of all trades kind of guy, Caruso with Chicago and LA, jack of all trade kind of guy, and somebody that we're certainly familiar with, and Andre Iguodala sort of fits under that heading. So I think those guys are really, really invaluable. I think the guys that do everything, that maybe aren't the star players and maybe can't shoot it like you mentioned, like Steph, but are somebody that D it up, that go on both ends, that get you rebounds, that make the right pass, that have that length as those coveted wing players, that from that 6'7" to 6'8" frame. Guys like that are really, well, they may not be star players, and maybe they're not the first guy you recognize in a roster, but they have a remarkable value, I think, to a winning team.
Well, that's why he's valuable. I mean, it's not just the master of none description. To me, it's because he's a wing. Like, you need wings in the NBA to win, and you need high level wings. So the hope is that Kuminga and Moody, and Kuminga's further along, but that those two players can turn into solid wing players. Now, I guess I would push back in the sense that, okay, what does Drew Holiday do well? He can guard the number one option on an opposing team. Caruso, the same. Iguodala, the same. Like, those guys are maybe not, you don't look at them and say, this is the one thing that they excel at. They just do everything well, but they're also three of the best two-way players, that we've seen. So Moody, I wouldn't consider yet a two-way player, but he's got a 7-foot wingspan. He's 6'6", 6'7". That in and of itself is valuable. And I think against players like we've seen, we can only take the last 3 games, but for example, I thought the job he did on, say, Jalen Brunson was his most impressive. Brunson's a good player. He was missing a few of his running mates, but Brunson also isn't a guy that can beat you with speed. Like Moody, to me, is a perfect matchup against someone like Brunson, because where Brunson excels is using his physicality, kind of the low man wins mentality, to either get into the paint, take small step backs, or be able to get to his spot and make J's. Moody is able to stay with him because Brunson doesn't have great foot speed. Against someone like Boston, I wonder if Moses Moody can stay in front of Drew Holiday, if he can stay in front of Jason Tatum, players that are both strong as well as quick and more athletic than, say, Brunson. So that to me is going to be a great test. But I am with Austin in the sense that I do think we need to see more from him. But to me, it doesn't negate the fact that over these 3 games, when he's gotten a chance to start, that he has elevated the floor just the way that Podziemski has elevated the floor of this starting lineup. And that to me is valuable, even though you're not looking, I mean, they're not putting up 25 a night. They're not going to go hit 10 threes, but they don't hurt you when they're in. And when you have Curry with Dre, with Kuminga, 3 players that are going to take the reins of the game and impose their will in different ways, then you just need players around them that will do their job. And Moses Moody does that better than a lot of players on this. Like, that's one of the reasons why Chris Paul is so good. You know exactly what you're going to get from him. And in regards to the question about Clay or CP this summer, to me, I'm not trying to downplay how good Chris Paul is and how good he's been for this team. But they started to make their run and turn this season around when Chris Paul was hurt. To me, I look at Chris Paul as gravy. I think he's a fantastic addition off the bench. He's a floor general. He's someone that can help you in multiple areas, and he kind of fills gaps. To me, Klay Thompson, now that he's on the bench, yes, he's inconsistent. But when he has a night like he did, say, against Washington, that's a game that you can just win by Klay Thompson getting you 25. They were up 16 in the first quarter and the second quarter, against Denver because Klay Thompson shot the hell out of the basketball. I thought they lost the game against Denver because outside of Klay, there was nobody that had and imposed their will in the second half, including Klay. But there was no one that really stepped up in that game. They were ahead in that game because of Klay. I don't know if Chris Paul's got a 25-point half in him at this point in his career.
No, he never has. I don't think that's the reason why the Warriors got him. But the thing I think with Klay Thompson is that he's become very one-dimensional. And if he's not shooting it well, the question then becomes, well, what is it that he's providing for your basketball team? And I would argue that he's become a bit of a liability defensively, although
Klay?
he had big rebounds. Yeah, Klay Thompson.
Yeah.
I think he had big rebound numbers against Toronto, but he's not. You talk about Moses Moody. Klay Thompson isn't staying in front of people any longer. And he's really become an area of. Now he's another one of those guys, deceptively at 6'6", 6'7", that has the ability to get out on the wing and defend guys and has that length. But he's not the defensive player he once was. And if he's not shooting it well, then where you at with a guy who's now in his mid-30s? I think I think when you talk about Chris Paul, has really it's difficult to sort of, when you think about Chris Paul, to quantify what it is that he does that makes him so good. But you look at, the pick and roll, and you knew this was going to happen with him and Trace Jackson Davis. He makes the Golden State Warriors just a better basketball team. And this is the very reason why they went out and they were able to get him. So it's an interesting question going forward when you think about, Klay Thompson, if it's an either or between those two. I mean, ideally, you like to keep both of those guys coming off the bench. I mean, how many times does Steve Kerr talk about, now I've got the luxury of having 2 Hall of Famers coming off of my bench?
That's true, but I do think that Austin brings up the point of which, in all likelihood, both of them are not going to be on the team next year because of the emphasis on getting below the second apron. If you bring both of them back, financially, it's just not feasible.
Chris Paul's gone.
I agree. And I think that's because as much as this is where you're spot on. Like, the quantifiable aspect of Chris Paul's game to me it doesn't do him justice. Like, for example, I could be off base with this. I'm curious what people think about it at 888-957-9570. I don't think Klay Thompson comes off the bench if Chris Paul's not on this team. And the reason being, Chris Paul set the tone of the season by starting 1,000-plus NBA games and saying, I can be the sixth man, by sacrificing. I think players have done that in the past for the Warriors. That's been a staple of their culture. Andre Iguodala was the first to sacrifice. Steph Curry's come off the bench. Draymond Green has come off the bench. Chris Paul at the beginning of this season had to come off the bench to help the Warriors win. I don't know if Klay Thompson is as okay with having his role relegated unless there's another first ballot Hall of Famer that's there with him. Klay Thompson has never come off the bench before this season. I don't think he wanted to necessarily, but he understands that's what's better for the team. And the person who set that standard at the beginning of this season is Chris Paul. So that's where I think he also adds, from a leadership standpoint, much more to this team that can go in a box score.
Well, yeah, I think you have to keep in mind and remember when he didn't close earlier this year, and he had that conversation with Anthony Slater, the Athletic, and he was pretty contrite and said, this is tough.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people interpreted that he was being really forthright about how difficult it is for him and older players to recognize they're no longer that guy. And I think that he had to have known that the writing was on the wall. He could see what Podziemski was able to do. And he was also his worst critic, knowing that he was no longer shooting the ball as effectively as he once did. So I think that it may not have been imminent, but I do think making the transition from him to the bench was something that if it didn't happen earlier this year, it was almost inevitable that it was going to happen at some point. So, yeah, and how is he to handle at that point? Well, sometimes when your hand's forced and you're not shooting it well, and another guy who's much younger is playing at the pace and the level that Podziemski was able to demonstrate early on this year, it's either what you don't really have a case to be made at that point. So I think that the transition from him to the bench is a little bit maybe dissimilar to that of Andre Iguodala as well as Chris Paul. So I think that the one issue I have is that he continues to play a lot of minutes, man, a lot of minutes. And all that tells me is that Steve Kerr, as much as we talk about the youth and as much as the youth has been able to make a difference in this Golden State Warrior team, that Steve Kerr is still inclined at the end of the day. Someone's pointing a gun in his head. It's like, I'm going with my guys, man. I still believe in Klay Thompson and not Trayce Jackson-Davis. And I'm not giving Jonathan Kuminga more minutes. And I'm not giving run to these other guys because I'm still going down with these. Like, there is not – I'm telling Steve – the one thing with Steve Kerr to me that is not notable is that, he's been a willing participant to let these young players develop and become the new identity of winning basketball for the Golden State Warriors as we enter this new era. Well, you still have Steph being Steph, but again, I don't want to get all dramatic again and talk about the youth.
Yeah.
But he is not somebody that has – It's happened simply because his hand was forced. Moses Moody's getting time for one reason and one reason only, and that's because Andrew Wiggins is doing whatever the hell it is that he's doing, his personal reasons, he's gone, and now Moses Moody is playing. It's not because Steve Kerr had the wherewithal to play this guy because he recognizes he can be an addition to this team. And the same could be true to a certain extent with Jonathan Kuminga, to Podziemski, to any young player. It's simply because Kerr had to, not because he wanted to.
I would disagree. Look, you're right. I mean, at the beginning of the season, the vets were prioritized. And I think come postseason time, we might see some vets prioritized. But, and we've kind of talked about this, I don't know at the beginning of the season what fans wanted or what media members wanted from Kerr to immediately just play and start Podziemski or play and start TJD, or Kuminga is probably a better example. Kuminga was supposed to just start at the beginning of the season. I know at some point he was, quote, out of the rotation, and I think that was a mistake. Moody, for example, not finishing against the Kings all way back, that was a mistake. But Kerr's learned from those experiences. And that's why I do think that the Warriors, as opposed to this year, are in a different place because they're not coming off of a championship. I don't know if it's being forced to play these guys, but I think there's a willingness now to lean more into the younger players because you are removed one more year from a championship. There isn't the expectation of getting, the expectation for the Warriors this year to me is to get back to where you did last year, to get to the second round. Anything beyond that is incredible. But I don't know, man. I'm looking at the minutes and the totals for this team right now, and I know it's not exactly what you're saying, but Kuminga's played the third most minutes of any player on the team this year. Podziemski's played fourth most minutes of any player on the team this year. Moses Moody's creeping up. Trayce Jackson's creeping up. Kevon Looney's kind of been shrunk out of the rotation. Last night, TJD played 6 more minutes than Kevon Looney did. Over the last 5 games, he's played more than Kevon Looney has. And that's a champion. That's a 3-time champ. Klay Thompson's now on the bench for Podziemski, who's a rookie. I know it's taken a long time to get here, but there's 24 games left in an 82-game season, And now we're at the point where the young players are in the mix, in which I think the melting pot has become more of an all-encompassing flavor. It's young, it's old, it's experience, it's youth. That to me is not something that I guess I expected from the beginning of the season. So I don't know. It's taken a long time to get here, but I guess I would push back on the fact that Kerr has just been unwilling to give young guys opportunity.
No, not unwilling. He's just slow to the party. I think he's recognized, like I said in his press conference last night, where he's like, yeah, at the beginning of the year, we thought we would use the same formula like we did 2 years ago to win a title, and things have changed. So it certainly wasn't in his thought process at the beginning of the year that I've got some young talent and I've got an older roster. I'm going to look to sort of work in some of these younger players. That's going to be sort of what I envision, sort of the winning formula or ingredient or recipe for this team is I've seen what it is Chase Jackson Davis can do. I've seen Pajemski, and I know Kuminga's got, so I'm going to make a concerted effort from day one to make sure that I bring these guys along so that when we get to the All-Star break or we get, ankle deep into the season, you will know the identity of this team and what it is that I, Steve Kerr, want to do, and that is to get these youngsters some run. No, I don't think, I don't think that that's been what it is that we've witnessed up to this point. I don't think he's been a willing participant. I think he's had to make a lot of those decisions.
And I want to continue that conversation on the other side. If you want to get into it, 888-957-9570 is the number. Is Kerr been late to the party? Has he been forced into this situation? How much credit does he get for a 13-3 stretch over the last 16 games? Are you giving it mostly to the players? Are you giving some of it to the coach? How are you divvying up that pie right now as the Warriors stand 5 games above 500 heading into Boston tomorrow? That's Dan DeVone. My name is Evan Giddings. We're back after this on Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
The Prophetic Matrix. Unlock the secret code to your destiny. A new revolutionary book by Michael John Toste. The first ebook to make history by being filmed in space. Discover your unlimited future. Get The Prophetic Matrix.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Halfway home on a Saturday morning, as always, Warriors This Week. Dan Devone, Evan Giddings rocking with you. Warriors are 13-3 in their last 16. Thanks to the 5-1 on the Comcast Business text line. Game high in points. Curry's got 10. Clay's got 4. Wiggins with 1. Kuminga with 1. Youngers have been starting, but Curry and Clay are still doing a lot of the scoring. I think that's an interesting point to kind of look at. Yes, we are talking about the young players. Moses Moody's been a lot better. Kuminga, I thought, was a man amongst boys in New York. But at the end of the day, we're right. It's funny. We've been doing this show for about 90 minutes, and the contributions of one Stephen Curry haven't really come up a whole lot. And I honestly, Dan, I got to apologize to the man a little bit because I suggested, I think maybe it was last show we did, but also earlier in the week, that he looked tired, and I think he might have needed a game off on the back-to-back. And 5 games before the game in, I think it was New York, he was shooting 28% from 3. And then, ho-hum, he breaks out of his slump, posts 30 points against New York, has another big game last night in Toronto, and it's just pretty much back to usual, 25, 6, and 6 for the chef.
Yeah, wait, I'm sorry. If I see my name up there, I've got to because it's all about me. It's the Dan Devone Retirement Fund, right? That's what the show's all about. So I was talking about the youth movement, and somebody chimed in. Does that apply to older radio hosts, Dan? Yes, it does. Hey, I'm looking, man. I'm ready to move out of the way and let young Evan Giddings, who doesn't need me to move out of the way before he makes his statement. But yeah, it applies to all. Listen, it's a young person's world, man, including every facet, including sex, man. You get older. I mean, I'm telling you, man, it's a young person's world at every level. That's who owns this thing, especially when it comes to sports. It is about now listen, you want to have, if you're completely young, then you become Detroit, right? Or, if you're young with no guidance, and you become a team that needs some level of experience like that as Steph Curry. I'm glad you mentioned Steph, because the one thing that scares me about Steph Curry is that, is that injury going to happen? Sorry to even go there, but like every year.
Strike it from the record.
Every year there's been something, right? And it's actually been beneficial to the Warriors. It's sort of this inadvertent load management. He's out for a couple of weeks. He's out, but it usually happens towards the early or middle part of the season. You can ill afford to lose him now. And, the same thing is, I was reading and talking to a buddy out in Los Angeles that they're saying the same thing about LeBron. Usually he misses that, 15 to 20, 25 games. It hasn't happened this year.
Yeah.
It's like, they're so LeBron-centric that can't happen at this point, as we're at the top of the stretch.
That's true, but this is also where I think, and sorry, sidetracked. My name's not in this text, but yours is, from the 510 on the Comcast Business text line. And it applies after your last statement, Dan. Let Devone jacket. Let Devone jacket.
Thank you.
Look, it's a young man's game. Also, shout out 888-957-9570. If anybody wants to guess Dan Devone's age, please feel free to call in. We're taking all suggestions. He has a very ambiguous look, but he is a young, older man. Kind of like the Steph Curry of the show. Kind of like a Steph Curry.
Awkwardly dancing around this.
Curry doesn't look 35 going on 36, but he is.
So did he have his 4th child, or she's...
I think she's just pregnant. Again, it's the 5th, because Boston's in there. But no, you're right. It's like... yeah, he's going to have his 4th child. Oh, my gosh. He's got a way to go to beat Phillip Rivers, but he's...
Phillip Rivers or Sean Kemp, but...
Or Antonio Cromartie. He's on his way.
Well, the difference is that Steph Curry is still married to
yes, of course,
all his children of his.
All the best to the Currys. Let's get back into Steve Kerr though before we pivot here. There is something fun I want to get to, and actually, you have a very rare expertise that I think can apply to a situation that we saw at the tail end of the New York game between Draymond and Wembanyama Hill. But before we get into that, let's get out to Clayton. Talk to Khaled. Wants to talk about Steve Kerr. What's up, Khaled? You're on Warriors This Week. How are you?
Doing good, Dan and Evan. Hope you guys are having a great weekend. Wanted to, just chime in and say that I think Steve Kerr's contribution to this 13-3 run is being, heavily underrated. I mean, he catches hell all the time when the team's not doing well or when their favorite players aren't being put in. But as soon as they strike fire, it's always the players. It's the players got together and they did this. But people don't understand the delicate balance that this guy has to walk, because Steph Curry has a lot to do with who's on the floor at certain times as well. I mean, if people don't think that Steph has conversations, maybe not during the game, but has conversations in regards to his preferred guys that are out there with him, they're crazy. And, imagine having all of these veterans with these younger players and having the depth that they honestly have. Their depth is actually a detriment to an extent, and it's admirable what he's been able to do to walk that balance between keeping Steph and the veterans happy and also developing the young guys. And if I ever hear again that they're not developing young guys after what we've seen with Kuminga, with even Moody, who's been getting DNPs, but you see what he's doing, with Brandon Pajemski, TJD, talent is one thing, but to see the influence that he and the other coaches have had on them in regards to getting them to buy into the system and work with a very difficult player like Steph, in the sense, not difficult by attitude, but difficult in regards to learning how you have to function within that organic system that they run, with all the cutting, the screens, and all the rest of that stuff. That's not an easy thing.
I got you, Khaled. Sorry, Devon was chuckling at the text line, I believe. I just asked how old everyone thinks he is, and the numbers are staggering. Thanks for the call, Khaled.
Yeah, look,
you're younger than Steve Kerr. How about that?
Well, here's the thing when it comes to Coach Kerr. I don't think that, don't get it wrong. Where would you put him as coaches right now in the NBA? He's like right at the very top. To me,
top five.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Top three. I'm sorry, if I'm starting a new franchise and I can't get Popovich and I can't get Spo in Miami, I'm going Steve Kerr.
Shoot, I might take Kerr over Popovich right now.
Yeah, well, because Popovich is 87 years old. But,
Devon is not.
I do not have... let me just start there and preface by saying this dude is still remarkable as a coach. Remarkable in that he still gets the respect of his players. He's still level-headed. Oh, it was fun. Yes, did you see him last night chew some butt, which he doesn't do?
Oh, yeah, at the beginning of the game. He was pissed. That was awesome.
Quick time. And see, that's just it.
Wasn't it the ref?
When you don't do it frequently and it's infrequent and you chew somebody out, it's like, whoa, we've done something wrong and we need to wake up and get going, because coach never necessarily is dropping F-bombs directed at us. Like, that was fun.
No, but that's one of the parts about Steve Kerr I love. Like, he is at his core like a competitive, fiery SOB. Like, he can unleash that upon players, and I'm sure he does it in practice more. But Steve Kerr's the kind of guy, like, he's a consummate pro at the podium. I think he's been through so many walks of life that he just understands people and is great with understanding where he fits in and how people's relationships kind of, navigate themselves through sports. But if he wants to chew your ass out, I feel like he's the kind of guy who can swear like a sailor, or likes to swear like a sailor at times to prove his point. And you get little glimpses of it from time to time. But it was funny. We were at the bar yesterday, the cafeteria yesterday, and at the beginning of the game, the Warriors come out a little flat. I think Toronto goes up, 17-9 or something like that. And Kerr's just fiery. And at first I thought he was yelling at a ref, because there might have been a call that was missed or something, but no, like he was chewing out his players on the tail end of a back-to-back after getting in at 7 a.m. because the plane had mechanical issues. Your team's tired. They're probably run ragged from the night before in New York. They're feeling themselves a little bit. They got to go through customs. They're pissed. They're tired. They're frustrated. And here's Steve Kerr like, no, MFers, get your ass up. This is a game we got to win. And I love that part of Steve Kerr, because he's got it in him. And you're right, he doesn't show it often.
And it was an ATO. It was right after a time. He had just taken a timeout. And coaches are very sensitive to, will call timeout, stop the bleeding, call a play. But if you screw that up and go right back to where you were pre-timeout, that really gets after him. And so he had 2 quick timeouts and just went after his players. I think the misperception with Kerr, I think a lot of people think he's just this really smart, nice guy, well-read, articulate, kid next door. Go look at his playing career. This dude, there's a reason why Michael Jordan laid him out. He's a feisty dude. He'll get in your face. And he's been in more than one scrap in his NBA career. And I'm with you. It's one of the reasons why I appreciate the guy as well. I like him as a head coach, but just like any coach, just like any player, we all love Steph, but they're not beyond criticism. And I think even Steve would, if you were to have a beer with him, maybe not. At the end of the day, would say, "Yeah, I've been a little bit slow to the party, recognizing some of the youth on this team," and that's all I'm pointing out. This isn't an indictment that he sucks as a coach, and I never wanted to be that guy when they were losing, saying this is Kerr's fault. And I think if you listen to the show, we never did that. I'm just saying, and I'm not speaking for you. This is just me. I do think that if there's Steve Kerr, if there's any sort of criticism to be leveled at him this year, is that it took time for him to sort of recognize what was taking place in front of his very eyes, that it just wasn't youth, it was impactful, talented youth that combined with that of the experience and the Steph Currys of the world, that you might have something here. And that's clearly what's happening to this basketball team. But I still think, at the end of the day, that push comes to shove, he's going to lean towards a Klay Thompson getting 30 minutes a game as opposed to Moses Moody cutting into those minutes or Trace Jackson Davis getting some run. So I still think, while he's certainly embraced it, and you could see it, but I still think it's sort of an ongoing situation.
I think that criticism is fair. Just like during the losing streak, criticism of some of the players was fair. Criticism of Klay Thompson during his slump and his attitude in the locker, I think that was fair. I think criticism of Draymond Green this year has been fair, although apparently not from Bonte Hill. And I think that Steve Kerr is someone, to me, the way I feel about Kerr is this. You can't have it both ways, right? If you don't believe that he can develop young players, well, you can't say that he hasn't. Like, I should say this. Let me phrase that better. The Warriors now have players that are younger, 2 21-year-olds in the starting lineup, essentially, even though Pods didn't start last night. So you can't say that he hasn't developed players. And I don't necessarily think it's the head coach's job to develop players. I think it's his job to win. I also don't think that Kerr has been someone that's been totally reluctant to lean in on young players. I think it's just a situation, and it's very rare in the NBA where you have 3 veteran members of a dynasty, or whatever the dynasty is now at this point, and trying to bring upon like the next wave. I just think that's a very hard needle to thread for a top 5 head coach, for a Hall of Fame head coach, for a bottom 5 head, like for any position or any head coach that would be in Steve Kerr's position. I'd like to think he's done a pretty damn good job. Like Eric Spoelstra, for example, I think he's the best head coach in the NBA. I don't know how much further along these players would be if Spo was their head coach, because Spo in Miami has never had to prioritize champions outside of LeBron and D Wade and all the and on those teams, the veterans were playing. There was no young players that were coming up during the Miami dynasty that have now taken over the reins. It happened after they left. They went and got Jimmy Butler. They drafted Bam Adebayo. They drafted Tyler Hero. They've developed players, but not from a place of their dynasty. It's taken them time to get over that. So, like, I guess when someone says Kerr hasn't done a very good job this year, I'm not saying you're saying that. I think what you're saying is fair, that he's been late to the party at points. My thing is, I just don't know who else would be doing a significantly better job than what he's done right now. And I'm with the caller. If the 13-3 is something that is, we're going to give credit to Dre, we're going to give credit to Steph, we're going to give credit to Kuminga and Pajemski and Klay for taking a new role, Paul coming back, Moody emerging, all this stuff, credit has to be given to the head coach. Because if we're going to come down his road, on the flip side, he's also the head coach of a team that is the second hottest team in the NBA right now.
It's almost, it's an admission much like that of, or an omission, I should say, much like that of Steph Curry. You just pointed it out. We're like, 2 hours deep into the show, and we're talking about the Golden State Warriors in this 13-3 run, 8 wins on the road, and we haven't even talked about the exploits of Steph Curry and how good he's been. I think it's almost sort of baked in at this point that we recognize, it goes without saying, how good of a coach he is, and that none of this happens without Steve Kerr. This whole dynasty is attributed to, yes, the big 3, but Steve Kerr is also a big, big part of that. I think it's sort of woven into the fabric. Like Do we at this point really have to underline the fact that Steve Kerr has a lot to do with a 13-3 run? I think you do that for a coach that maybe is a little bit maligned, and you're like, oh, well, this guy, this head coach necessarily, we need to recognize what it is that his contributions have been. I think Steve Kerr at this point has established himself as one of the premier coaches, not only currently in the NBA, but I'd say historically one of the best to ever do it. So the bar is extremely high for him and the Golden State Warriors. Why I think it's more glaring when you see a mistake, because they're so infrequent. And to me, while people don't necessarily have to agree, I think that Steve Kerr is usually on top of everything, and very rarely can you point at something and say, yeah, I think you're missing it here. But to me, one of the few times during his remarkable run with the Golden State Warriors, which has been a challenging year, obviously, this year coaching for the Golden State Warriors, is the fact that, he has not been readily embracing a youth movement that I think has been there from day one.
Yeah, and one thing that's been synonymous with Steve Kerr's teams, and Uncle Looney points this out on the YouTube chat powered by First NorCal Credit Union, coaching is about managing egos. You can see the chemistry in as great Kerr is, and a lot of the credit has to go to the coaching staff. I agree. The Warriors are synonymous with chemistry and culture outside of last season for very obvious reasons. I think that even though some of that residue still remains in particular areas, they've done about as good of a job as you can of wiping whatever plagued them last season off of the court away from the organization. And I'm not just pointing the finger at Jordan Poole. I think there's been internal growth from a lot of players that have had agendas. And Klay Thompson was one of them. Chris Paul might have been one of them coming into the season. Draymond Green. I think that's maybe why the Andrew Wiggins leave of absence is not concerning, but I think just there's a little PTSD for a lot of people when they hear out for personal reasons, and there's a family matter because last year he came back and he ended up playing hurt in the playoffs. So I think if the Warriors are to be at their best, Andrew Wiggins needs to be on this team. But it's difficult to envision or not, I guess, go down the road of, oh, well, here we go again. So, I think that Kerr also, during this stretch, it's primarily Green, Kuminga, Wiggins. That's really been the front line that has changed this part of the season around. I think Kerr ultimately knows, and he's got 4 rings to prove it, what wins in the playoffs. And as much as you want to see young guys developed, I don't know if it was fair to expect last season, and certainly not their rookie season, someone like Kuminga and Moody, their first time in the playoffs or near a playoff series, to be ready to contribute, even if they had gotten more rope in the regular season. I'm very curious to see how this postseason Kuminga plays as finally a guy that is in the starting lineup, that is not looking over his shoulder, and that has been empowered or has forced Steve Kerr to empower him. How does he play in a playoff series? That's, to me, why the Wiggins thing is important to me from a basketball standpoint, because I'm just worried that if Wiggins is not at his best, the Warriors inherently cannot be at their best, because in the playoffs, it is about experience. It is about vets. And when you look at a team like Denver, if you're just measuring, starting fives, well, they have all the players right now in their primes, but they now have championship experience. KCP's got multiple titles. Jokic is at the top of his game, but they have players that have been battle-tested. The Warriors have plenty of experience from their big three and their core, but their young guys still they don't have as much experience. So that's why, to me, the Wiggins thing is, I guess, a little bit interesting, just because I do feel like Kerr is going to get him back into the starting lineup when and if he returns, just because he knows that's the winning equation.
I would agree with you. I think the original question that we were bantering about is, what do you do with Moses Moody going forward?
Yeah.
And I think it's more of a reflection on Moses Moody. While Wiggins, if you're going to make that run in the postseason, and you talk about dethroning the Denver Nuggets, yes, you're going to need the best version of Andrew Wiggins, and you're going to need that experience. I completely agree with you. Things change when you get to the postseason. But what do you do with Moses Moody when he returns? Has Moses Moody, to you, made the case that the idea that this is just a numbers game and we can't play you, or you're relegated to just a few minutes a game, is that still applicable? Because I would argue no. Moses Moody has proven to everybody that now he needs an opportunity to get some serious run. Granted that you're going 12 deep, but I told you, I laid out how I think it should take place.
Yep.
Where Saric, Looney being removed from the rotation and also cutting into the minutes of one Pajemski as well as Klay Thompson.
Yeah, the Looney thing is interesting because I mean, God love him. He's not been very good this year. But
he is 6'9".
He is 6'9", and he's also he's played in a lot of big games. And he's played well in big games, even if he hasn't played consistently well throughout this season. Like, do I think if the Warriors get to a postseason series against probably one of the top 4 seeds, right? Or they will play one of the top 4 seeds if they get in. I think Looney early in that series is probably going to play more than Trace Jackson Davis. And we might be having the same conversation again of, well, do you actually trust the young guys? It's not that I don't think Kerr trusts young players, but you have to go with, in my opinion, who's been there in the moment before. So it's a delicate balance, and we're getting ahead of ourselves. But I think your question about Moody. So to me, where I would look would be a couple players. I think you're right. Saric, to me, he's played himself out of the rotation. Like, God love him. If he's not hitting shots at a high clip, I just don't think he helps you. I think he hurts you so much on defense, even when they slide him to the 4 and they have Looney or Dre or TJD at the 5. I think Saric just really hurts you. The only thing that he helps with is spacing the floor for someone like Kuminga, because I think when Saric goes to the 4, Kuminga can play more of the 3. But I also think that Saric has taken some minutes away at the 4 from Kuminga. So it's not just Moody. It's also JK. I'm looking at, I think last night's game is probably tough to kind of configure minutes because you had multiple players out. You had Pods out. Klay was back in the starting lineup. Wiggins is obviously out. And then also Gary Payton II. But I think Payton's minutes are probably best around 10 because I just think he's a little injury prone. Not that he's not a good player, but I wouldn't want to work him more than, I would say, 15 minutes just because I'm afraid he's going to break down, and he might have even got hurt against New York. I think what Kerr has done quietly with someone like Draymond Green can allow Moody to play a little bit more. Like, for example, since Draymond Green came back, he hasn't played more than 30 minutes in a single game. Like, that is also kind of quietly significant. I think Pajemski doesn't need to play 30 to 35 minutes a game. I think he could play him 25 and give some of those minutes to Moody. So I'm with you. I think Saric shrinking out of the rotation wholly, which he kind of did against Toronto. I think keeping the backup 5 position not as in the limelight or not bringing it, like, you don't have to play, I think, a traditional center as much as some people would want on certain nights. And then I think bringing Pajemski's minutes down a little bit, along with keeping Draymond and Steph's minutes to around 30 or below, I think that's enough to carve out 15 minutes for Moses Moody. Quinones is not going to play.
How about elevating Kuminga's minutes as well?
I think that's something that's to me more related to Saric than it is to Moody, because I think Moody and JK play different spots. But you're right. Yeah, I completely agree. And I want to continue that conversation on the other side. Also see calls. 888-957-9570 is the number. Getting into the conversation. Also, we will get into Draymond Green and Bonte Hill's interaction after the Knicks game, because Dan has had a long history of being in those positions, being on television, being in locker rooms, talking to big boys, and I want to know what he thought about how Bonte as well as Draymond Green handled that. All of that is in the final hour coming up next year on Warriors This Week. Evan Giddings alongside Dan Devone, back after this on 95.7 The Game.
It's Saturday, and Palisades is going off. This is Johnny Mosley with Toyota's Tahoe Report. Load up your Toyota and dust off the powder boards, because today is going to be filled.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Yeah, what would be the equivalent on radio of like the people's elbow or, a four-finger chokehold like the one Draymond Green put Rudy Gobert in a few months ago?
Well, we should.
I'll turn that on.
We should. See, that's what happens when you become. That's the first sign of an older sportscaster that needs to be put out to pasture. You don't know where the on button is.
We're not going to take you out back. What are we talking about?
Shoot the dog. Well, maybe we should come up with some sort of a phrase as to what happened live on the air with one Bonte Hill and Draymond Green.
That's Dan Devone, Evan Giddings with you. 1 hour left here on Warriors This Week. 888-957-9570 is the number. The Warriors 3-1 after the last week. Now 5 games above 500, 24 games left. They got 13 of them on the road, including tomorrow in Boston at 12:30. Warriors live right here on 95.7 The Game at 11:30. And, of course, 11 more home games beginning on Wednesday with Milwaukee. But, yeah, let's get into that, Dan. I want to get your thoughts on just what happened between Draymond Green and our very own colleague Bonte Hill after the Knicks game. This was on NBC Sports Bay Area.
Draymond Green, welcome to Toyota Warriors Postgame Live. Bully Fezzi, Bonte here. And first of all, let's talk about MSG.
Bonte,
what is it like?
I'm shocked you're talking to me. The way you was talking about me when I got suspended, I am very shocked you're talking to me.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, really?
Yeah, go ahead, though.
Yeah, go ahead. Hey, tell me about Planet MSG. You guys go there once a year. There's a lot of Warrior fans out there. Describe the energy out there at MSG.
It's always a fun game.
What do you make of it, Dan?
That was like Marshawn Lynch back in the day at the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Well, I think Bonte really handled it well. I said this to you first thing when we because I just saw it. I just happened to see it because I saw something on YouTube that said Draymond Green post. I'm like, oh, let me hear what Draymond had to say after the game. So the first thing I guess was the fact that those two have yet to speak. That Draymond has obviously, it's been a while since he's returned. So. That's been festering. I thought Bonte handled that extremely well. Like, let's just, you got to stay the course, get back to the original question. Don't pick at that scab. That's not the platform. You can get on radio where you have a lot more time. TV is a whole nother venue. Like, that's not the place where you want to dive into, why don't you like me? Come on, man. I'll tell you, we were just chopping it up with Shasky one day. Let's talk about it. Like, nah, that's not the audience. It's a pregame show. So he handled that like a complete Jim Nance, fill in the blank, a Bob Costas. That's what you want to do. Just drive the ship and another day. That's for another day. Or leave it to Warriors This Week for Evan and Dan to go ahead and chew into that. But I thought just from a professional standpoint, I don't think you could handle that any better than having to think on your feet and being in that live moment.
Yeah, no, I thought Bonte handled it perfectly. It was interesting. Like I was thinking about, and I think the difference between radio and TV, you're spot on. Like on television, and I haven't done a whole lot of it, but when you're doing those interviews, it's pretty much just you tee up the question, they give you 15, 20-second answer, you boom, 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 get out. But the moment that you open Pandora's box by saying, well, what did I say? Or, hey, what did you... Well, then you give them the rope to just take out the flamethrower if Draymond Green so chooses. And I think the interaction was handled great by Bonte, and he pretty much diffused it. And I think it's much to do about nothing. Like, if those guys meet at Chase Center on Wednesday, I don't think there's a beef. I think that Bonte was right to say what he said at the time that he said it because he's a professional. There's also a difference between radio and TV. You're not going to go on television and for 15 minutes dig into a subject and an in-depth thought about what should or what shouldn't be. On radio, though, you have the platform to have these kinds of conversations. And I don't think it was unfair for Bonte to say at the time that Draymond Green had hurt the Warriors and they were considering perhaps trading. Like, these were all things that we were discussing on this show, on all of our shows, because that was the position that Draymond had left the Warriors in. So I also think that, I don't know if Draymond was trying to prod him or if he was looking to test him. I think he just... had one of those moments like I hear Bonte Hill was like, oh, this guy. Okay, well, I'm going to just let him know that I know what he was saying. And I think they both are going to go on their separate ways and continue to act as pros.
Yeah, I think they're two different platforms. And sports talk radio and what? Bonte's got a 4-hour show. And when you have Draymond Green, love him or hate him, people are going to choose a side. And more often than not, and I'm sure I'm not telling you people something you don't already know, that you got to poke the bear a little bit because you're trying to create some sort of subject matter. You're trying to create interaction with you, the fans, and the callers and the message board. So you're looking for something. You're controversy, believe it or not, and Draymond Green, leaving the Golden State Warriors. As a Warrior fan, you don't want to see it happen, but I'm sorry, it's good for radio. It's good for stuff that we do. So yes, there's going to be people like Bonte and a lot of people they're going to sink their teeth into it and talk about it simply because they're trying to get your dander up. They're trying to create some interaction with the fan base. And also, I'm not saying that's what Bonte did. I think those were his true thoughts about how it is that he felt about what it is. And I don't know exactly what it is that Bonte had to say about Draymond, but I can certainly imagine because that sort of, that thing was, that sort of subject matter was certainly much more frequent then than it is now since his return. And I can also understand and appreciate Draymond Green. Draymond Green is one of the more real people.
Yeah.
And instead of taking the political route and saying, thank you, sir, and just answering his question, as a lot of athletes would, he's like, bro, I don't appreciate what it is that you had to say, regardless of whether it was radio or television, and I'm not giving you the time. So I think it was, I certainly don't begrudge Draymond Green, and I think it was handled about as best as you can expect from a professional like that of Bonte Hill.
No, I mean, and who knows? This also might be an opportunity for them to build their relationship and make it stronger and have a conversation behind the scenes as opposed to on television. Or, I don't know, maybe Draymond Green wants to call in the morning roast.
He doesn't care. I
don't think he does.
Professional athletes just don't.
Well, especially, we want our athletes to be real, right? We want them to be honest, and that was a very real moment that was handled the way it was handled. So,
I mean, the same thing happened with, I want to say, Kevin Durant, and Charles Barkley gets into this weekly. And I think it was Kevin Durant that was giving him these one-word answers because it was, and Charles had to think during the break, like, well, guys, what did I say about, remind me, because the same thing happened with him and LeBron. LeBron didn't want to go in it. So yeah, players get over it. Just like anything else, time heals all of these things. I got into, and now I got to talk about me. So I went after Ken Griffey Jr. on television.
That's right.
When I was in Seattle. And I went to a Mariners game because I had a scheduled interview before a game, and I was walking onto the field with my cameraman, and somebody came up to me and said, "You've got to leave." I said, "What do you mean I got to leave?" I got a press pass. We have a scheduled sit-down interview during batting practice. I forgot who it was with so and so, with Alex Rodriguez. This is
Jay Buhner.
Thank you very much. Who happened to be a very, very good friend of Ken Griffey Jr. So they said, "No, you got to leave." And I pushed him, like, "What are you talking about?" And I didn't drop do you know who I am? But I'm like, "Come on, man, what are you talking about?" I gotta leave. Yeah, I'm not leave. What are you talking?
You know who I am.
They're like, "Ken Griffey Jr. wants you to leave." And I went up to Junior and I said, "Junior," and he was taking, he wasn't taking BP, but he was playing catch. He was playing long catch. And I said, "Junior, what's up?" And he didn't look at me. And I said, "Dude, what's up?" He said, "I heard what you said on the air, man. I heard what you said on the air. And you went after me, so now you can leave." He's like, "I heard every single word that you had to say, and you got to go. You got to go." And I said, "All right, if that's the way it is." But I said, "Junior, I'll tell you what it is that I said because you're taking it out of context." But that wasn't the place to have the conversation. So, listen, I think at the end of the day, quite frankly, if I'm Bonte Hill, but if I'm Matt Nahagian, the fact that Draymond Green is listening,
you love it,
to 95.7 The Game, listening to what it is that Bonte has to say, that's sort of what moves the needle at the end of the day. But these things happen, and players are just like anybody else. They're humans, and they're sensitive to these sort of things. But just like that at Ken Griffey Jr., I never had a beer with the guy, but I was able to sit down and talk to him. I was glad as hell when he left town and went to Cincinnati, but at the time it was pretty hot and heated. But these things will happen. And I think if you're worth a damn in this industry, you'll have incidents like this. There's a lot of people who can play it straight and not have anything to say and play both sides. But Draymond should really appreciate that if someone's going after you. I mean, Draymond, you do it every day, so maybe at the end of the day, Draymond should have more appreciation of somebody who's got yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if look. There's always a line between fair and foul, but that's interpretive based on the individual. So Draymond felt that he stepped over the line. Like I've never been in that type of situation with someone like Draymond or Ken Griffey Jr. But I've worked for several different, whether it's minor league teams or college teams. Been the voice of particular entities. There is an expectation to, I don't know, promote and kind of dilute some of the negative things that or negative thoughts in your mind. So I never would have been in a situation where an athlete approached me about what I said, but they approached me about what my broadcast partner has said. And that's something where, I think it was like with the Tigers, right? Casey Mize, former number 1 pick, Alex Fido, who's a former first-round pick. Like those guys, thank you, didn't at the time, and this was like I was working in AA, and those guys didn't feel like the broadcast was being fair to them during some of their tougher outings. And I guess I had defended one of them by making an excuse of like, well, the wind's blowing now. They gave up 5 home runs and, they're, I don't know, like they're on a pitch count. And there's some other institutional thing that I kind of like brushed past with. And both of them were like, yeah, no, I really appreciate you doing that because number one, that's the case. You seem like you're tapped in. We talk to you every day. We see you in the locker room. But also your broadcast partner just threw us under the bus. Like he just buried us. I'm not trying to sit up here and give up 5 home runs. Like I'm a first-round pick. I make millions of dollars. I'm trying to get to the show. And the line between fair and foul to me was, I didn't know what to tell him because while I thought that my partner, for example, was probably a little too harsh, he wasn't insinuating they sucked or anything, but he kept harping on the fact that they had gotten just bludgeoned that day. And but I think that's kind of fair. Like, you have to tell it how it is. If you're doing a radio call, you're doing a TV game, and this is play-by-play. It's not what Bonte and Festus and Mullen are doing on the pre- and post-game, but it's like you have to bring listeners in. You have to tell them the story of the game, and if the story of the game, or in this case, the story of the season, and as it pertains to Draymond is, dude, you got suspended indefinitely. You put your team on the hot seat. We were wondering if you're even going to be a Warrior again, and there was reports out there that it might be 20 games, it might be longer, it might be that, like, all of that to me just thrust into the forefront. Everything was on the table in regards to the criticism about him. And, while I think there is a line to be crossed, I guess, from you don't go after someone's like manhood or, you don't make it personal. But if it's within basketball or if it's within the sport, like you're talking about with Ken Griffey, like to me, all that's fair. And I think some feelings might have been hurt, but now they're out in the open and we can talk about it and we can discuss ways to move forward. And I think that Bonte Hill's probably just going to put it behind him because that's what he did on the air.
I think the moment that NBC Bay Area decided to hire Bonte Hill, they should have known, or at least Bonte should have known that potentially this could happen. Because Bonte Hill's his platform here at 95.7 The Game is very, very different from what it is that he's doing, right? He's just basically he's a traffic cop up there with NBC Sports. He's just making sure that you transition well. He's able to toss the mully, get you in and out of breaks, prepare people for the pregame show, and get into a postgame show. What he's doing much more of a deep dive here at 95.7 The Game, is a completely different animal from what it is that his job description is on television at NBC Sports Bay Area. And so this was, while it may not have been inevitable, you could see this happening because, he's got to say some stuff, and he's outspoken as any good sports talk radio host is, and that's not his role on television. So, yeah, this is, to me, if I was the powers that be that hired Bonte, you had to know in the back of your head that potentially there could be this sort of showdown, especially when you got someone like Draymond Green that plays for the Golden State Warriors.
888-957-9570 is the number. Discussing the Golden State Warriors hot stretch as of now. Also talking about, shout out to Hams in the YouTube chat, First NorCal Credit Union. We are taking guesses on Dan's actual age. No, it has not been revealed yet. Might not be revealed for the remainder of the season. Who's to say? We do know he's not 87, though. That is a fact. Let's get out to the phone lines, though. Again, 888-957-9570 is the number. Dan DeVone, Evan Giddings, Warriors this week. Let's get out to Phil Mo Mike. Phil Mo. What's going on, my man? How are you?
Yo, what's Gucci, man? Y'all sound good.
Thank you.
Y'all don't sound as good as Kevin Dana. Dana was going crazy last night.
That's good.
The ball, he got the bone got to be at least now. I told him he got the Keanu Reeves vibes. I think he's 51 years old because I know he own a business. So I think I'm gonna say 51. I'm gonna say he looked 35, but I'm gonna say 51. And then
close.
Two things I just want to get to real quick. It's one thing to get your spot, right? You got a spot, you on the team, you come up. But I think somebody was in Moody's ear, told him, because Steiny always harp on Moody's just a guy. They said, bro, when you get in the spot, you got to start taking advantage of every opportunity. And I feel like Moody is doing that. In my opinion, he's a better shooter automatically than Wiggins. He's a better passer than Wiggins. His IQ may even be better than Wiggins. And he's not a Wiggins defender at his prime, but what we've been getting from Wiggins, I'll take Moody over Wiggins right now. Based on what we've been getting from Wiggins, I'll take Moody over Wiggins right now. Straight up, real talk. And then my last thing is this. This has nothing to do with you all, but last night, the Guru was talking about like all-time teams. Real quick, the all-ugly team. I got the all-ugly team real quick. Tyrone Hill, Odin Polynice, Popeye Jones, Sheldon Williams, Andre Kirilenko.
Oh, boy.
My two I got coming off the bench, Dan DeBone, Dan, and Evan. The two I got coming off the bench, I got Sam Cassell and George Morrison coming off the bench, man. My ugly seven go crazy, straight up.
Sam Cassell, E.T., that's brutal, bro.
Oh, a lot of those names are a little bit too old for him, but I've heard.
Do you
of
remember
a few.
Georgie Murasan?
Oh, I've seen pictures.
Yes,
I've seen pictures. I would.
Smells like cabbage.
I don't know if he cracks the starting rotation. Thank you. I don't know if he cracks the starting rotation, Dan. But my addition to that roster, God love him. It'd be Joakim Noah. That guy's pretty ugly.
I don't know. Joakim
pretty ugly.
Really?
Yeah, Sam
you got to see his
Cassell's up
wife
there.
or his girlfriend because she certainly doesn't think so. But maybe that's the wallet that's talking.
Yeah, well, we all know how that goes. Yeah, starting five all.
Filmo,
he's been cooking that one up for
Duff.
He's had that in the chamber.
Wow. Well, if we still had the 6 o'clock show, I would have done a deep dive for 4 hours on that subject matter. That's a good one.
Also, cannot confirm nor deny Dan being 51 years old. I don't know if we're going to pry. It's like trying to pry a prediction out of Dan. It's just you don't get it. Like you're just not going to get one.
I'll reveal.
Someone on the text line was asking if we're going to play the schedule game with Dan Devone. We know it's your favorite game the next 24. Hey Dan, are they going to beat Boston? Okay. Are they going to beat Milwaukee?
Oh,
are they in 3 weeks? Are they going to beat San Antonio on a back-to-back?
Well, don't worry. Will you think about me? Because guaranteed, you will do a show and you'll talk about the minute the schedules are released with the San Francisco 49ers.
Oh, yeah.
And someone will talk about the first 5 games or 6 games. They should be 4-2 going into Philadelphia on week 7. Or I see them at 5-1. And here's, oh my God, like that. First of all, you're never right. And secondly, no use doing that show right now, but nothing's more a waste of time than trying to get ahead of yourself. Like you got Boston on your plate, eat your lunch tomorrow, and then you can think about Milwaukee.
I'm just Googling some of these players. Dude, Popeye Jones.
Great stick, right?
Jiminy. Oh my God.
Filmo with the call of the day.
That is
Filmo, you came strong, brother.
Oh, that is foul and yet so funny in the same breath. Dude.
Hey, one thing though, Sheldon Williams did marry Candace Parker.
Yeah,
so
and there's a few jokes. Well, there's a few jokes as to why
are they still married?
No, I think they divorced.
No, she plays for the other team now. It's
really?
Yeah, there's some jokes behind Sheldon Williams that I've heard that are none too kind, but Popeye's so appropriate.
Well, and Sam Cassell is an assistant coach with somebody now in the NBA.
Assistant coach of like every team in the league, it seems.
I wouldn't even go there, but yeah, Sam Cassell is not easy on the eyes.
Oh, God. 309 Comcast Business text line. No, I'm not a Pajemski stan. I don't fight for any slander of the young man. I'll fight for some slander, but no, Pods is right where he should be. Dude, he's a rookie starting for a team that's 5 games above 500.
Just one more thing on Moses Moody. Yeah. By the way, that's such a great Steiny line. Is that what he says? He's another guy.
He's just a jag. He's just a guy.
That's a great line. Well, here's the other thing is that Rick Bucher always says this, that we always as fans and just sort of like the I don't know him. I just saw him on Colin Cowherd and he was talking about this, but sort of the climate we live in with social media. And he's like, he uses this phrase like, we want to microwave everything, right? Like, it's like right now, who are you? This is who they are. You win a game, you suck. You lose a game, or you win a game, you guys are something. You're going to the Super Bowl, you lose a game, you guys suck. Fire everybody. Yeah. We're in this microwavable sort of culture these days. And as it relates to someone like Moses Moody, like we're passing judgment on the guy right now, right? This is the sort of plays. He's just a jag. He's just another guy. He played well in this particular game. He's 21 years old. Like we always talk about the growth of Jonathan Kuminga. Where's he going to be in 4 or 5 years? Moses Moody is he 21? He might be 20. He's 21 years of age, right?
Yes, he is 21.
21 years
22
old,
this year.
Right? Yeah. I mean, Trace Jackson Davis is 24. So, like the idea of this, again, like we want to microwave everything, and this is who Moses Moody is. Like this is still a young man that is only going to get exponentially better.
I wonder, look, I mean, I don't know about exponentially, but he's certainly taken a lot of strides in the opportunities he's been given. I don't look at Moses Moody as, I don't think he's just a guy. I don't think that he is, if I'm going to combat anything that Filmo Mike said, it would be, I don't think that Moody is as good as Wiggins. He's more consistent, and that is valuable. But as a player, Wiggins, if he plays the way that he can, brings a different dynamic to this team. And I think it's primarily on the defensive end. I don't see Moses Moody in a playoff series checking number ones. At least not yet. Again, like you said, he's 21. No, I don't see it yet. So
his lateral movement is something that leaves a lot of question, I think.
Yeah, I think he gets away with it because he's a 7-foot wingspan. Against slower-footed players, I think he can stay in front of them. But like I feel like I sound like Steiny right now. Like I don't mean to nitpick the kid, but look, he's good, and I think they have now found multiple 25 and youngers that look like they're going to be able to contribute and have been contributing and have been stepping up. But we're really looking at this team against Boston, right? I personally don't think Moses Moody is going to be the difference in that game. It's going to be Curry, it's going to be Draymond, it's going to be Klay Thompson or Chris Paul, Kuminga. They have a few players, I think, that can take control of that kind of game. But at the end of the day, you need your dudes to be dudes. And I wouldn't consider Moses Moody nor Brandon Pajemski a dude yet. And I don't think they should be. They're 21.
Sorry, but I do have some White Shadow knowledge in the 415.
Oh, yeah. I looked this up. I've never seen the show, but again, just Googling pictures of the White Shadow, but Brandon Pajemski is salami. Yes.
Well, it's just a lot of humor on the show today. I think Moses Moody on a good basketball team is a role player, is a significant role player. I'm with you. He's not a starter, I think, on an NBA championship team. I think you hope that Wiggins comes back, and Wiggins is Wiggins had turned a corner as well. Wiggins has been shooting it much better from three of late, and Wiggins was that two-way player again for about a month. So you hope that he's that guy when he comes back. But I do think in the perfect world, Moses Moody on a good basketball team, and if that's the Golden State Warriors, is a good role player.
Yeah,
and that might be his niche going forward in the NBA. And those guys are to be valued. It just so happens he's on a team that has a remarkable bench. But I think forget about all of that. Forget about his age and forget about the fact that he's done so well. I think the big picture is that he's proven that he deserves, while he's a role player, what is his role going forward, and define that role and let him play, Coach Kerr, because he's proven that he can contribute to this basketball team. And that's really what I take away from the last couple of days of the last week with him replacing Wiggins, that he's gone from a guy that has completely been forgotten about and sits at the end of the bench and more often than not does not play. And when I say does not play, doesn't play an entire game, or he doesn't take off the warm-ups. That now he has made the case that, listen, I know you're deep, and it's a deep basketball team, but Coach Kerr, come on, man. Recognize. I need to get some more run.
Byron Mullins, he's added to the roster. Byron Mullins on the all-time ugly team. Yeah, he is. 7-footer. He can come off the bench at center. No. On the other side, I do want to actually look ahead to the Boston game because it feels similar, Dan. You talked about this earlier. It feels similar to where we were last Saturday looking at Denver. And that's a game that you felt like they could win. They did not. Do they need to win against the Boston Celtics for us to really think about this team in a playoff type of setting, or do they not? Does it not need? To me, I think the question is, who is tomorrow's game bigger for? Boston or Golden State? We'll get into that on the other side. 888-957-9570. Also, I do have one final thought about Moses Moody that I want to dig into. But again, we'll do that on the other side with Warriors this week. Evan Giddings, Dan DeBone, back after this, 95.7 The Game.
I'm Chris Riccobono, founder of Untuck It. When I started the brand, I wanted to make the perfect fitting untucked shirt. And over the years, we changed the way guys think about how they dress. The secret was our obsession over...
Warriors This Week continues on 95.7 The Game.
Welcome back to Warriors This Week as Golden State, winners of 8 in a row, try to make it 9 straight when they take on the Boston Celtics coming up tomorrow, a nationally televised game, ABC. We'll have the coverage beginning at 12:30, and don't forget 95.7 The Game, beginning with the pregame show. You got that covered tomorrow, Ev?
Grandy will be on the game tomorrow in Boston.
So the Warriors looking for the sweep. What do you think? 4-0 on the trip?
I don't. And I hope I'm wrong. But the reason why I don't think that, and it might be counterintuitive, but I think tomorrow's game is bigger for Boston in a way than the Warriors. And it's because of the psychological advantage that the Warriors have had over Boston pretty much since the 2022 finals. Really since Game 4, which Curry snatched their souls in Boston. And I feel like the Celtics are a team that like they got the best record in the NBA. They've won 10 in a row. I think they're on a near historic pace offensively speaking, but it's a team that there's something about them, Dan. And I don't think I'm the only one in this party that doesn't feel like the Celtics are a team that's just going to go and win the championship this year. And it's not because of Denver. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't get out of the East. And there's something about the Tatum-Brown combination that it's like Brown is more of an alpha than Tatum is, but Tatum's clearly the better player. And I think their hierarchy, it just runs into issues in the postseason, combined with the fact that I don't think they have a great head coach. I don't think that Joe Mazzulla is all that. I think he makes some mistakes. And to me, I look at the Boston Celtics like I look at the Los Angeles Dodgers. Like, they'll beat any team on paper.
That's a great analogy.
But at the end of the day, you're looking up and they're 115 and, 49 or whatever it is. The math is off there. But you know what I'm saying? And then you walk into the playoffs and all of a sudden they just get shell-shocked. Clayton Kershaw gets banged up and gives up 6 runs in the first inning to the Diamondbacks. And the Celtics at the end of the series can say, well, we had the formula. We stuck to our process, but your process got beat 4 times out of 7. So, again, that's all playoff related, but I just feel like the Warriors have had ownage over the Celtics mentally, and tomorrow's going to be a bigger game for Boston at home, and that's a place they'll have also only lost 3 games this year.
Yeah, I think they're more incentivized. I would agree with you, and I relate it to the Warriors' win last night over the Toronto Raptors. As fatigued as the Golden State Warriors were in that back-to-back, even if their flight's on time, having to go from New York and then Toronto through customs and play a game the next day, that's really challenging. But the fact that their flight was delayed and they were sleeping on the plane and they got into their hotel room at about 8 o'clock and slept for about an hour and then went back to the arena to play another basketball game, and the fact that they played the way they did tells me that that was one of those games that they were pointing to. Like, maybe it wasn't for public consumption, but I think they're like, hey, the last time we played these teams, they put up 76 on us in a half.
Yeah.
They rolled us. And it's the Raptors. Like, I don't care how damn tired you are. Let's go beat these guys. So there's a lot to it when you're looking for incentive throughout the course of an 82-game schedule, and especially when you're somebody like that of Boston that really has nothing to play for. I mean, they've run away and hid out there in the East. Like, they've got the number 1 seed, has been locked up for a while now. So why am I getting out of bed to play the Warriors? Well, because it's the Warriors. I think that goes a long way when you think maybe it doesn't necessarily pertain to Porzingis, but it hits right at the heart of when you're talking about Jason Tatum, who hasn't played well, Brown, Horford. Yeah, it still stings what happened 2 years ago, and especially out there in Boston where the Warriors won that title.
No doubt, and that's going to be a 12:30 tip. You can also, of course, watch on ABC, but listen to all the action right here on 95.7 The Game. Kevin Dan is going to have the call for that. Mark Grandy, Warriors Live, Warriors wrap-up an hour before, and then, of course, following right after the Warriors take on the Boston Celtics. Yeah, from the 510, I'm with you. Tomorrow's game is way bigger for the Celtics. Dubs beat them without Draymond in December. Porzingis also didn't play in that game, and they've been very good with Kristaps this year, but they've been living in Boston's head rent-free since 2022. I agree. I think it's also a game, like you're talking about the fatigue of the Warriors. I also just think it's, on the schedule, I think it's just a tough spot. Like, it's going to be your 5th game in 8 days. You have the final road game of your trip, but you've already been to New York. You're on short rest against Toronto. You're kind of lumbering in. You got a day off, but then after that Boston game, you come back home. You have 2 days of rest between Boston and Milwaukee. So I just feel like the Warriors at this point in a 4-game road trip, not that they're limping to the finish line, but I also just think it's a tough spot for them schedule-wise. And Boston's a team that has been rolling as of late. Like, they just beat the Mavericks by like 20 points. And they've shellacked teams like New York. They've shellacked teams like, well, they beat in a close game against Miami. They're geared up, I think, for this game. And it's also their last game on a homestand before they hit the road for 5 in a row. So I think the spot is tough for Golden State. Do I want to see them win? Yes. If they lose that game, which in all probability is going to happen, does that mean I look at the Warriors as any different than they were, the previous 16 games in which they went 13-3? No. I think that Boston's a really, really good basketball team. And I look at tomorrow as like a gravy game. if you win that game, that is gravy on top of everything that you've proven so far over the course of this week. Just like I looked at the Denver game as a gravy game. I know everyone came in on Monday and said, well, now the Warriors, they got no chance, and they got season swept by the Nuggets, and they got, to me, that is something we reserve for the postseason. Tomorrow, it's just a regular season game, and I think it's going to be a real tough one.
It is, but they want to win it. And while everything you said is certainly true, there's the fatigue. It's the back end of one of the most grueling road trips, and they knew this going in. Anytime you have to play out on the East Coast, and you're dealing with the time change, and then to throw a wrench into things with their flight being delayed going out to Toronto. Yeah, this is a team they're running on fumes, but nobody cares. Nobody cares. There's not going to be a person at the Garden tomorrow that's like, oh, well, the Warriors at the back end of a trip. No, they're going to want to kick the crap out of Golden State. I would say, even with all that being said, and you've won, 3 straight on this challenging road trip, and even if you lose to Boston, you still got to feel good coming home. Win the damn game. Beat Boston. If this is a Warrior team, and we always talk about the benchmark with Steph Curry, as long as he's upright and hitting threes, and Draymond's being Draymond and blowing off Bonte Hill, well, then championships is the way this team is measured. It's not about getting into playing games. It's not about getting into the Western Conference Finals. It's win the damn title. And so that's the benchmark, whether it's right or wrong. So when it comes to a team like that of Boston, if you're going to win a title, or if this is a title preview, well, then beat them. Make the statement. You have every excuse in the world to fall back on, but I pretty much guarantee you, Ed, that if they lose this game, not that the road trip will be a failure, but this is going to be a dejected bunch on that long flight coming back.
See, I don't mean to downplay the game tomorrow, but I feel like the game on Wednesday at home against Milwaukee is almost more of a true test. Like, that's a game coming off a road trip in which you go either 3-1 or 4-0. That's a game you want to get. Like, that's, I don't know. I mean, I think tomorrow would be nice, and it would be really cool to come back here next Saturday and talk about, okay, these are the teams that you're taking care of business of. Again, I think against teams that are on a 50-win pace or better, they're 3-16. The Warriors are, so they haven't beaten the best of the best. But I would also push back on that. Like, I'm not looking at the Warriors as if they're a championship team right now. They don't have perhaps their third or fourth most important player in Andrew Wiggins. Podziemski might be out tomorrow. Boston's at full strength. They're at home, a place that they're very good. Like, if the Warriors don't win that game, I'm not going to be shocked. But if they do, I kind of will be shocked. And that does tell me that, yes, the Warriors are maybe moving into a different category. But again, maybe I'm just looking at this from a macro standpoint. If they will, after tomorrow, if they lose, will have still won 13 of 17 games. That still means in that time, they're one of the top 5 teams in terms of record in the NBA. It might hurt if the Lakers win, because then they move back into 9th and you're in 10th. So to me, it's really just about trying to get the 6th seed. And tomorrow is not a must-win game, in my opinion, for the Warriors.
Not at all. And I certainly wasn't trying to frame it as a must-win game. I guess I was looking at it more from the vantage point of the Warriors, that if they lose that game, they are not going to find any sort of there's not going to be any solace in the fact that we had a successful road trip. I think this team feels as though they can match up with anybody in the NBA. And at times, and certainly during this road trip, they looked, if you've turned the corner, found your identity, and you have a Hall of Fame core, well, then I think the Golden State Warriors feel as though they can beat the Boston Celtics. And they sleep when you're dead. And this idea that you're fatigued and you've been challenged on this road trip, and you have to go from Toronto now to Boston. Well, then play Jonathan Kuminga the 35 minutes, because he sure as hell isn't tired. Trace Jackson Davis has got energy. These young players, that's not an excuse for any of these guys. So I think the Warriors feel as though that they can beat Boston. And anything short of that, I wouldn't say that the road trip is not a success, but I think, again, the Warriors are not going to be in a good frame of mind if they don't beat Boston.
I think they'll be fine. Seriously, I mean, you've beaten them once this season, and it looks like we might even have some playful banter from a Boston fan, from the 650. The Celtics have 17 banners. They're not worried one bit about USF clowns. Clowns is a little harsh. from the East Bay. Dan's from San Francisco, though. The Celtics are going to win the next 3 championships while y'all keep living in dreamland. Well, I can tell you this, the Boston Celtics in my lifetime, I don't mean to date myself or not, they've won 1 championship in my lifetime. That's what I know about the Boston Celtics. I'll let you do the math with the Warriors.
Come on, Boston. Where you from? Worcester? Come here, Boston. Let's hear from you. From Worcester, Mass. Enough of you people. Warriors took you to the shed last time out. Come on, man.
Yeah, with your boy, your favorite play of the season, right? Trace Jackson Davis's blindside block on Jaylen Brown.
Let's go back 3 months ago. I thought we were going to get through the show. You want the play-by-play? No. Jaylen Brown with a step to the hoop, all out of nowhere. Nowhere comes what's his name? Trace Jackson Davis with the block of the century. No, just to recap, Jaylen Brown.
That was his coming out party, though.
Had a lane to the hoop. And Trace Jackson Davis on rotational defense, which you just don't see, came from one side of the floor to the other to challenge Jaylen Brown and block a dunk. And I did the double take, as did a lot of other people, just saying, wow. To me, that's still the play of the year. As much as Steph has done, the step-back threes, Trace Jackson Davis block on Jaylen Brown told me everything I needed to know about the young man. That right then and there, I would have said, sit Sarge his old butt down. And right then and there, I said, this dude, that's the infectious energy that you just, as much as Klay Thompson will bring you, as much as Steph will do, and as much as Draymond can provide, that youthful energy, it's rare, especially on a team like that of the Golden State Warriors that is old. And I'm just saying, man, let that in the front door. Embrace that. That to me is still the landmark play of the season.
Well, how about this? Okay, so if we were on the East Coast right now, Dan, we were talking about, I don't know how the East Coasters would look at Wiggins or some of the things that's been going on. Let's put the WEEI hat, or Odyssey Station out in Boston. Let's put the WEEI hat on these Boston ñaños. Shut the hell up. What have you guys won? What has anyone in the city of Boston as related to the Celtics won since 2008? I mean, Paul Pierce is dancing with strippers and smoking cigars off his 1 championship. You kicked Ray Allen out of town. He went and won without you. Kevin Garnett is just sitting up there trying to read off a teleprompter in his podcast right now. He doesn't know it. All your legends got nothing on the Warriors. You guys in 2022 wilted when Steph Curry after Game 3 said, enjoy that final victory, because that's the last one that you got. And that's the last time that the Celtics were in the finals, because you choked against the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals. You choked against an 8 seed, like you choke all the time. Like you go back to Beantown and choke on the loss you're going to take on Sunday to the Golden State Warriors. That's what I got for you. And that's what I'd be saying if I was on WEEI.
Ev, what happened to Ev here?
Shut the hell up.
The mild-mannered Ev.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got to go apologize.
Wow. You got a little Steve Kerr in you as well. You think it's a rivalry?
Well, I wish.
You think it's a rivalry?
Huh?
You think it's a rivalry?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, well, it is on the Boston side.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest here.
If you were to top 3 rivals right now for the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
So you'd say Celtics 1?
The Celtics, the Lakers. Yeah. I mean, I think any team that LeBron plays for is probably...
Have the Kings climbed into that?
I don't know if they're top 3. I mean, the playoff series, it's interesting. Like a year ago, I would have said Memphis.
Yeah, exactly.
The Grizzlies, I probably would have put in that category, but they're
so bad
off the cliff right now. So, yeah, maybe the Kings. Yeah, I wonder who people feel like is on that Warriors rival list. I mean, that's the thing. I think in general in sports, it comes down to who you face in the playoffs. And that's really where rivalries are built. It's why I would consider the 49ers and the Eagles like a rivalry because of when they met in the NFC Championship and then this year. The Cowboys, obviously, with the Niners. But even though they don't play in the same division, with the Warriors, you don't look at division rivalry. Like the Pacific Division doesn't mean anything to me. But when you play teams or you play specific players in the postseason, that's where rivalries are built in the NBA, in my mind. Like I would say the Celtics and the Heat probably have a rivalry because they've gone back and forth to get to the finals or to not.
It's really a testament to the Golden State Warriors and their sustainability because they've gone through so many rivalries, but because these teams drop off. Like they had a rivalry with Houston, but then Houston turned to crap. They had a rivalry with Cleveland, with LeBron and all those NBA final appearances. And then, Cleveland obviously fell off a cliff. They had a rivalry with Memphis, and Memphis is no longer any good. But the Golden State Warriors have maintained this level of winning. So they have rivals, but because the other rivals aren't able to keep the same pace as far as winning games and maintaining a sense of relevancy like that of Golden State, they have to find new rivals almost like every other couple of years.
Yeah, that's a good point. Ken chiming in from behind the glass, the Clippers. Yeah, so, back in the beginning of what this dynasty was, or I should say right before 2015, the Clippers were the biggest rival because they met them in the playoffs and they got eliminated by them, but they always played tough. I think, and maybe it is kind of an individual thing the more that I'm thinking about, because I felt like Curry and Chris Paul had a great rivalry. It was pretty one-sided outside of that postseason series, but you look at Curry and Paul, the Rockets, Curry versus Harden, I think were a rival for quite some time with different characters. Chris Paul was in there, Westbrook. I think Curry versus LeBron is still the best individual rivalry we have in the NBA.
Yeah, and I don't like the fact that they're all chummy these days. I like to remember the early NBA Finals, Warriors, Cleveland Cavaliers, and they didn't really know each other. And Klay Thompson was barking at LeBron, and LeBron was getting the face of Steph Curry, and then of course, obviously, Draymond kicked him in the junk. Now, you get to a level of fame and fortune, and everybody sort of starts hanging in the same social circles, and you lose that sort of edge. Like, you want to beat LeBron, but at the end of the day, you're going to see him at some sort of a cigar party or something. Like, you guys are all hanging out together now. I liked it back when it was a lot more younger and raw. Like, just want to beat his ass because I don't like him.
Well, Draymond still's got a little bit of that in him.
Well, not with LeBron anymore.
No, that's true. Yeah, well, yeah, he's not going to try and, swing on his genitalia or anything like he used to.
Not swinging, brother, but
yeah,
I hear you.
510. The Warriors' rivals is the NBA. That's pretty good. Try to cut down on that second.
By the way, what we're talking miscellaneous basketball.
Yeah.
Are you ready for the coming out part? Well, it's not even a coming out party to recognize the new best basketball player in the NBA, and is just going to hold on to that mantle for the next decade.
Wait,
plus.
Can I guess who you think that player is going to be?
Yeah. Well, it's not who I think. It's becoming fact. Yeah.
SGA.
No.
What?
No. Well, SGA is a really good basketball player, but I'm talking generational.
Oh, Jokic.
No.
Who you got in mind?
I'm talking the next 10 years.
Wembanyama?
Yeah. Wembanyama, because he plays in San Antonio, you just don't recognize the dude. If it's happening, man. This guy he might be the greatest to ever do it. Who's the greatest right now? Michael Jordan? This is...
Or LeBron, yeah.
This is it. And this guy, with his personality...
does he have one?
That's just it. He's witty. He's affable. He's the new face of the league. This guy, man, he might be the defensive player of the year this year. So really quick, they took on, so there's this we talk about rivalries.
We'll get to the age reveal, by the way.
Of me.
Yeah.
So anyways, he was going one-on-one with his new rival, that being Chet Holmgren, right? They both are 7 feet plus. And so he's owned Chet Holmgren. And so OKC was playing San Antonio. This is, did you ever think you would see this as a kid? Or just it was like watching aliens on another planet. Here's Chet Holmgren at 7'2", out on the perimeter, crossing up and trying to get a step back three on Wembanyama, who's at 7'4". These two, what am I watching here? The skill level of these guys, and he blocks Chet Holmgren, and Holmgren falls to the ground. It was his clean block, and he goes the other way. He's raining threes. He's changing shots. He's everything. He's got a handle. All that stuff you heard about him in France, it's that and then some. And I know you don't hear about it. So the thing is that San Antonio, if you're a San Antonio Spurs fan, it's not one of those, well, we'll be good because we got a 3 to 5 year plan. You better hurry up. Next year, get him some boys. Because this guy's got to be on national television for the rest of the world to see. He is the real deal, and then some.
To me, it's about what he does on the other end. Defensively, he's blocking 3.5 shots a game.
Can I chime in here real quick?
Yeah,
so he's already got more total blocks and steals than Rudy Gobert did during his Defensive Player of the Year.
That's crazy.
Award, like in a full season, it was before the All-Star break, I believe. So yeah, more blocks and steals.
And correct me if I'm wrong, he's only playing like 27 minutes a game.
He's on a minutes restriction. Yeah. That's what they're talking.
He's doing all this just like
so when he's out of a game, they have like, I think statistically the worst defense in the NBA, and when he's in a game, they're like in the top 5.
I believe
top
it.
3.
I believe it. The preseason game he played against the Warriors, I don't know if you caught that, but he had like one possession where Wiggins just thought he was going to take an open 3, and Wembanyama closed the space just like
one
that.
Step, yeah.
Like he's 7'4" with a freaking damn near 8-foot wingspan. It's impossible. He can alter and contest almost any shot. You can barely see the rim over him. So I think offensively, whatever gives you is gravy. I mean, the fact that he can take and make threes is huge, but defensively, and I don't know who people believe to be the greatest defenders of all time. That's the list I think he's going to be on. And whoever you put on your Mount Rushmore of best defenders, he's going to be up there.
Yeah, but that's just it. He's just not Bill Russell. Like on the offensive end, like I saw where over the last couple of months, he's shooting better than 40% from 3, and he shoots a lot of threes. Better than 40%.
Yeah.
Like the dude's 7'4", and he's got a handle.
So is Porzingis.
It's crazy what this guy is doing.
And for charisma, he actually got on the mic after that Thunder game.
Exactly.
He got on the mic and lit a "Go Spurs, Go" chant. So he's got the charisma.
No,
That's pretty cool.
He's also crazy competitive, man. When they talk about, do you want to be the Rookie of the Year? Do you want to be the Defensive Player of the Year? Instead of taking like this, this aw shucks political sort of response, he's like, yeah, dude, yes, I do. I mean, he is going to win titles. He's going to have multiple MVPs. And when it's all said and done with, he just might be the best to ever do it, man. It's just the fact that he's playing out there in San Antonio.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Can you really be the face? Like, if you're the best player in the league, can you be the face of a league if you're in San Antonio?
Well, Tim Duncan was for a while, wasn't he?
Face of the league?
Well, maybe not. I mean, the 3 of them were.
Don't get me wrong. I think Tim Duncan is an all-time player.
Well, it would, because he's sort of unassuming as a player, but weren't the 3 of them sort of like during that run before it was sort of, post Michael Jordan, before LeBron? Wouldn't you say Manu and Tony Parker and those 3 guys along with Tim Duncan were sort of the it team, the it guy, the faces?
I associate the Spurs with winning and longevity, but as far as, and just because I think of the Lakers three-peat, like whatever it was between Jordan and LeBron, I think Kobe was probably many people's association with basketball. Not that Tim Duncan wasn't incredible.
Yeah, you're right. Are you saying it's the market?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I just think it's hard when you're in a mid-sized market. Like, for example, Giannis might have been the best player in the world for a couple of years, I think, before Jokic overtook him. And now Jokic, but can Jokic really be the face of the NBA in Denver? Also, there's an international component to this as well, where Wembanyama's French, and I don't know if Americans are one to say that this guy is like the representative of the NBA. So I think it's interesting. I mean, right now it's still LeBron and Curry, I think. But that's certainly something that we're going to be paying attention to. You want to tell people how old you are?
Right now?
Yeah.
We're going to wait for the end of the show. Oh, we are at the end. We're going to have to carry it over to next week.
Wait, is it at the over-under? Oh, it's 11:55, over-under. Over.
Perfect.
Over-under.
We'll leave it at that.
I'll be taking guesses. Yeah, the big reveal is going to be in a week from now. Warriors this week on Saturday. I do not think that the Warriors are going to win tomorrow in Boston, despite the big rah-rah speech. That's my honest, objective truth.
Oh my God!
What do you think, Dan?
Talk
to me.
I'm not good at. I don't want to. Just like the schedule, I don't do predictions.
You had them beating Denver.
No, I didn't. No,
you're backtracking.
No, yeah, I did. I thought they would beat Denver. I look. They. My point is that while they shouldn't win that game, and I don't know, it's a really difficult task. But as a Warrior and as a fan, as Dub Nation, like, you got to think you can beat the Boston Celtics. You can't. You can't shy away from the Denvers and the Celtics of the world if we're thinking about this team really turning a corner, finding an identity. But, oh, wait, put the brakes on. It's the Boston Celtics. No, go ahead and beat their ass tomorrow.
Speaking of other big games, I'm going to be out at St. Mary's Gonzaga tonight. So
good afternoon, everybody. I'm Evan Giddings, and welcome to the Gales and the Bulldogs of Gonzaga.
I'm not going to be on the call. I'll be at the game, though. Yeah. Might have a couple pops if anybody wants to stop on by.
All right. Where's that game at?
St. Mary's. Yeah.
Right.
I'm going with Steiny.
Oh, nice. That's sort of a Cracker Jack.
Taking the old man.
Is that sort of a that's a little Cracker Jack box stadium there in that arena? That's a little.
I thought you were talking about the population.
You hanging in Moraga before that? You gonna hang in Moraga?
I'd be out there.
There's a couple of, I was gonna say, Club Canyon Brewery. There's a couple of good spots.
Oh yeah, the one right off the right off the
I'm
campus.
right around that area, so that's how I know.
I mean, there ain't too many watering holes in Orinda, Moraga. Right. Yeah.
You're out that way, rich boy in a hot tub. Is that you?
No, man. I'm still blue collar, but I'm just lucky.
Still blue collar.
I thought I was relating to the dude. He's from Bayonne,
New York.
Jersey.
Yeah,
he's a Jersey guy. Lived in New York, and now he's telling me he's running in Moraga.
Now he's behind the white curtain. Until next time, always fun on Warriors This Week. Big thank you to our YouTube and Twitch chat powered by First NorCal Credit Union. Shout out to the Comcast Business text line. Thanks to everyone that called in. As always, we appreciate the conversations as the Warriors try and pick up a big win tomorrow. Would like to move 6 games above 500 and complete the road trip on a 4-0 as they get set for the Milwaukee Bucks at home at Chase Center on Wednesday. But again, 12:30 tip, 95.7 The Game. Kevin Dan is on the call. Mark Randy has your pre- and post-game coverage. Warriors Live, Warriors Wrap-Up tomorrow, 11:30, and then right after the game. From my man Dan Devone, for our guy Ken Luttrell, my name is Evan Giddings saying so long here from the 95.7 The Game studios. This has been Warriors This Week. We'll talk to you next time.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I have a serious heart condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or HCM. Some symptoms include being short of breath, feeling tired, or having